Good morning and welcome to Ysleta Independent School District's Board Retreat Meeting of the Board of Trustees. The meeting of the Board of Trustees is a retreat for the board that the public is allowed to attend. As provided, Ysleta ISD Policy BED, we invite members of the public to make comments during the citizens' input portion at the start of the meeting, according to the instructions provided with the electronic posted notice of our meeting. Legally, the board may listen but may not enter into discussion on matters in citizens' input. Trustee Lucero, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry. Couldn't hear you.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee,
Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Brief moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucero. Trustee Lucero, do we have any citizens' input this evening, or this morning, I should say? Huh? Oh, okay, well, let him in.
Oh. I just had flashbacks. Yeah, they heard I was here.
So no speakers, thank you. Okay, this is a workshop and no action will be taken. Dr. De La Torre, do you have any presentations?
President Ochoa, members of the board. Yes. I lost my place. At this time, I'd like to turn the workshop over to our facilitator, Dr. Robert Duron, Associate Executive Director of Governance Services for the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB.
Thank you, Dr. De La Torre. I want to, first of all, thank you all for having me here and as an extension of TASB. I want to begin by congratulating you. I mean, you all have you've gotten your A rating. You've got an incredible reputation as a board. And, Xavier and I have talked, obviously, prior to this. Mr. Ochoa and I have spent some time on the phone and just happy to report what a good team this is. So, and I'm a former baseball coach, and there's a saying in baseball, if a kid is hitting the ball, whatever you do, don't start coaching him, right? And that's the kind of feeling I get here. It's a little bit, I don't mean that sarcastically, but I mean I just want a message that we're not here to fix anything as much as it is just kind of fine-tune things. It's almost like a coach saying, yeah, we've got, I use a lot of coaching analogies, so forgive me, or teaching analogies, but gathering the team up when they're 3-0 and saying, guys, we've done a good job, but we've got some things we need to work on, that I'm concerned about. So just tightening those things up. Not to mention, it's good practice, if not policy, for you to go over your board operating procedures. That's one of our goals today. We're going to go over the ethics policy, or your ethics that are, again, part of your policy, just kind of revisit those. Again, just to be reminded of what keeps us all together, what keeps us strong, where we need to maybe tighten things up a little bit as a team. And most of this will come from you. So I'll be able to facilitate that discussion. And the third goal is to end on time, if not sooner. So let's move with efficiency. Thank you for breakfast. We'll probably work through lunch. You do get your team building credit hours for this, so we'll arrange for that. But congratulations at the end of the day. So if there aren't any other comments, we'll just jump right in if that's okay. Okay, we're going to begin with, I'd like to begin with you introducing yourself for my purposes. Tell us, tell me why when it's going to require for you to think back when you actually made the decision to run for the board, when you were elected. And then, so tell us who you are, why you ran for the board. And the one thing I want you to share is going to maybe think back a little bit. What's the one thing that once you got on the board you did not anticipate? It's like, wow, I didn't see that coming. This is something new to me. Whether it's I need to know a lot about finance. I need to know a lot about community whatever that is, engagement. So that makes sense as our first activity?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with you, Ms. Woodruff, if that's okay.
I guess I need to turn this thing
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Is that, do we need it on? Because we're recording. So I think I've told this story to pretty much everyone, but when I decided to run for the board, and I don't really have to think back about my reasoning, because at that point in my life, I had most of a big lot of my family were still in high school and in elementary school and junior high. So they were spread out, but I had a very athletic group of kids. And so I was constantly down at Bel Air High School, either for games or for picking children up from practices and stuff like that. And I had people that would come to me, a lot of coaches in particular, that say, Mrs. Woodruff, please run for the board. And I'd say, sure, yes, I'll do it. Did not mean that I would do it. I mean, I felt like and I still do, I feel like I'm not a politician, and I didn't think this was something that I would be good at or that I would enjoy at all. And so I was like, no, thank you. But my husband and I attend church, and we had gone up to the church, and the pastor was preaching a sermon. And literally, his sermon was, get out of your comfort zone and do what I'm calling you to do. And so I went, oh, gosh, you've got to be kidding me. I've got to do this. I've got to do this now. So I went down the very next week. It happened that was when we were supposed to be signing up to run for office. I went down, put my name in, and the rest is kind of history. So basically what I've done every year since then is I've waited to see whether that calling was still in place. And so far, it's still in place. So that's why I'm still on the board. To make it even better, though, we have become such a good board that it's just a joy to serve on this board. Because even though we've been through some really tough things,
Somehow I win, and I get into office, and I'm like, great. And the newspaper comes up, hey, that's fantastic. What's your first order of business? It's like, well, if it doesn't end up in the newspaper, so find out what a trustee does. And then I meet with the superintendent, and the bus drivers union guy wants to meet. It's like, bus drivers? I thought this was just kids. And then the superintendent wants to talk about finances and all these other things. And I was like, I thought this was just kids. And just kind of started from there. And I've been learning ever since, which is great. I've been having a good time and hopefully helping my community out along with the rest of the district. So as long as I continue to be able to be, as long as I keep learning, as long as I keep having fun and hopefully helping out, then I'd like to keep doing it.
Wonderful. Wow, so another kind of story of perseverance with all these people coming after you while you were running. So do you, think back about was there something that really surprised you that they're like, wow, I've got a learning gap to fill in when you got on the board?
Initially it was, I remember talking with everybody and I kept asking questions and I think they're getting tired of me. It's like, what does that acronym mean? What does this acronym mean? Because again, I came from fire department where we take wet stuff and we put on red stuff. And it's like, man, I can throw out the letters TASB, and I bet you it means something. It's like, well, actually, it means, yeah, of course. So I think that was huge, and then so was just trying to understand just the large number of dynamics that go into not just a school district, but just a school, because a school within itself is this huge corporation with so many different departments and things going on, and the different inner workings, the budget that they have, and then on top of that, you add 60 other schools and a $500 million budget, and they put me in charge of it, me along with 6 other people. It was intimidating at first, but it's been one of the best joys of my life.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's obvious. It's amazing what the lens that we looked at, that the community looks at our schools, you know, and maybe even the board members, and how it's got to be a simple task, but once you get behind the curtain, it gets pretty complex. So there is a lot of learning. And you also mentioned stay out of the papers. I think that's a good mantra and I think we say that because we love being in the paper with good news, obviously, but we know it's hard we used to track our stories. We have 50% good stories, 50% negative, but negative travels fast, sells more papers, as we know, or newscasts. So that's a real challenge, but I think that's a good discipline for all of you. Good. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramirez.
I would just like to add one thing, an addendum to Mr. Haggerty. He is part of his family is part of a political dynasty in Northeast El Paso. And
really helped. I think they thought they were voting for one of my uncles.
and he
Rode his coattails.
and he's had state representatives, judges, city council members, commissioners, and also the Haggerty's a real strong presence in El Paso Fire Department. And I started my career in EMS in Northeast El Paso, and so when somebody would say, well, talk to one of the Haggertys. Oh, okay. So anyways, it's nice, and I worked with his dad and his uncle, and folks like that over the years, and it was kind of cool, and have the opportunity to work with Shane just was really nice.
And they were champions of public schools while in office as well, so I remember that while I was here. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. There was 2 things that really happened. One was that my kids went to private school, went to elementary. And then in high school, they decided they wanted to go to public school. And so we went to public school, and it was my first experience with public school. I mean, I'm a military brat. My dad retired to El Paso in my junior year in high school, so I went a year and a half to public school here. And I enjoyed it. But with my sons, it was different. And we had raised our kids in a private school environment because of faith. It was a faith-based community, and because that was important to us. But when we went to public school, because we were used to being so engaged, and Connie knows about these things, you're engaged because you talk about meetings every night. There's all these things going on, and they expect you to be there. And here I went to high school, and there were some people that said, well, we'll give you a call. And there's some people that made it clear they didn't want you there, But the big thing that happened in the 6 years that my 2 sons were in high school at Ysleta, we had 4 different principals. And, I really struggled with that because we just never found our way those 6 years, and we weren't doing all the high stakes testing, but we were still doing testing. I forgot what they called it back then. It would have been 2006, 2008, something like that, you know? And so I wasn't real happy about that, but I did notice that there was driven APs at the school. There were placeholder principals, which bothers me still. Driven teachers, and some of those people, including one that finally convinced me to run the first time, Paul Kane, just driven people that make a difference on a kid level, on a student level. And then YISD, like all the school boards here in this area, I don't know if it's true across Texas, they have an interesting history. And I'm one of those guys that would watch the 10 o'clock news and holler at the TV and saying, what is wrong with you people? And our board did some weird things, and some of these people went to jail, and they got in trouble, and they did dumb things, And it's like, how do you know you're not going to get caught? Everybody's watching everything you do, Heck, they're watching what you're eating and drinking. And so I remember watching YISD go down this pipe here, and then when they really got in trouble, I just kind of shook my head, and it's like, they're taken away from their jobs, whatever their job is supposed to be. A good friend of mine was a school board member at SISD, and you know him very well. And he and I would talk stuff because he would always share what he was doing over his school district. And finally one day I was just ranting and raving. And he says, you know what? Either stand up or shut up. He says, go do something about it. Go fix it. And I'm like, I don't even have kids in the district. He goes, you don't need to have kids in the district. He says, your kids are educated there. You and your wife are educated there. He says, go see what you need to do. So I got online, looked up, what does a trustee do? Well, that's simple. Hire and fire a superintendent. Do a budget, Wave and, show up and smile and wave, Get that down.
It's like a job description.
Yeah, it's a great
They don't tell you everything.
And I think that that's what that was the interesting thing to me. That was going forward was I didn't realize what a complicated machine public ed is, and there's so many things going on. And I don't remember if it was Shane or Connie that was with me that time. We went to a Sunday morning session at the end of TASB, I think. And they gave us a handout that talked about, 100 years ago, this is what the mandate was for public ed. And it was basically, you remember that one? And it was a real simple handout. And it was like, you had to go in there, open the school, start the fire, make sure the place was swept out, and make sure that you put the books out. That was what it was. And now, 100 years later, there's like almost 200 mandates that we have to meet and continue to have to meet. And you talked about the legislative session. And so I think that was the part that was really interesting to me. And I can tell you, even now, it's not as voluminous, at least because it's all computerized. But when I first started, we would get these giant binders of things. And Sunday afternoon, I would go lock myself away somewhere in the house and just sit there and go through it and wondering what the heck I was reading sometimes, especially the financial documents. And so I think that's number one. And I think the other big thing for me, learning about the board, I came into a broken board, as well. And I was truly amazed by the pettiness, the self-serving, and the vindictiveness sometimes, And one of our previous board members, she was hard to care for, But I'm going to tell you, she was not a bad person. She just had a hard time expressing herself. But there was a couple of folks on our old board, that first board, man, they had it in for her, They took her down, and there was no need to do that, There was no need to do that. And I think that weighs on me, because that lady didn't deserve to do that. She was just a good community volunteer trying to make a difference in our community. And so I'm surprised by that level of vindictiveness. And when I see the political climate in Texas, it really bothers me. A good friend of ours here on the board who was in Central Texas, he left to go to Washington because he had to get out because they were threatening him and his family, and just the political ugliness, you know, and so that's too bad. That's too bad. You know, we've been really lucky in the El Paso community. We had some mask mandate issues, and we had some other things like that. But I think our community, and I don't know, I think El Paso is a special place anyways. I think El Paso, we're a little bit different, you know, and Ysleta has certainly been different, you know, so.
The valley, on this side, I think it's even more different.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that the other night, in a good way, so.
No, El Paso is very unique. I was sharing with Xavier how much I miss, you know, my wife was born and raised here. I don't know if you know that, but and when we came here to live for 3 years, it's very special. I wanted to, when you were mentioning just a couple of things, Mr. Bustillos, before we get to you, that it's maybe something you would personally think about in the future if things get difficult, that your board member that said, just stand, show up, put up or shut up, or whatever it was. Yeah.
Tony AU.
Oh, Tony AU, okay, yeah. Oh, wow, yeah, that sounds like him. But it's
Changes everything.
yeah, and I love this expression, is that when there is a gap from where we are versus what you recognize where you think we should be, that you know, it's easy to stand over here and complain, but leaders step in the gap. You know, Martin Luther King's an example of that, all other leaders, but leaders stand in that gap. Board members, you all are standing in that gap, and that's a scary place to be. But I'll tell you, it's not for everyone. It just came to mind. I don't mean to cut, you know, and delay you, but so that's huge. And no, I think you're right. I think when you recognize that, when you recognize the pettiness of some of the board members, I think it becomes their egos. It becomes personal versus team, and not laying those things aside. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. But it's good that you came in there and sort of righted that ship and represented where we should be in that gap and moved closer to it. So you're closer to this side of where we should be, not perfect, but you certainly aren't back where we were. So that shows some real leadership. Thank you for sharing, Mr. Bustillos.
Well, I guess the reason I ran, I guess it started with a previous board. My wife's a teacher. She's been a teacher for 23 years. And she comes home one day and says, you know what, we're getting a new school. And it was the first bond that came out. And I'm like, well, I'm excited. You know, we're getting a new middle school. And I thought that was something that was, you know, very exciting, especially for our community. That school was built in 71, so it's about time. So then a couple of months pass, and she comes home and she's like, we're not getting a new school, we're just getting a remodel. And so sure enough, that summer I see Riverside Middle School. They're pulling out the foundation because the foundation was sinking. And you can see these slabs of concrete coming out the door because they're remodeling our middle school, and it was so frustrating to see that happen. So you start looking into why that happened, and you start seeing, well, the representative that was there was not for the bond, and kind of like what Mr. Rosales said, it was that representative wasn't treated well. She does have a good heart. She fought for the community, but I don't think she did it. She went around the right way of doing it. So at the end of the day, I coach also. I coach the league from basketball to football to wrestling, and a lot of the community members, parents asked me to do it. I was scared. I don't know the first thing of being a board member, but they knew that something had to change. And I said, all right. I talked to my wife, and it was a very hard decision. I had three kids in the district. And, you know, you go out there, the teachers union, I met with them. They finally said yes. I ran into another funder who by the way, said, you're going to run. Yeah, he goes, your back's against the wall. He goes, you're running for a district that not only are you located below I-10, but you're below Alameda. Why? And that motivated me, because those kids deserve every bit of what they need, you know? And when you say that, there's people that say that, and there's people that believe that. And we are the smallest lowest enrollment in the district, but you see these kids, they deserve everything that all these other kids get. Case in point, fast forward to now, being on the board, and with this board, and we've built 2 big elementary schools. And you see these kids who are below I-10 and below Alameda walk into these schools and say, this is my school? This is mine? And, you know, that goes back to that person that told me that, and I go, it's, you know, it just shows that we can do it, you know, and like I said, it wasn't me by myself, it's the board here. It is a collaborative work that this board has done along with our superintendent, and they believe in it, and that was the hardest part of being on the board. So coming on is just very scary. We did it, and I've been learning since day one. I sat down with Mr. Haggerty before I did it, and he was giving me some advice and what it's like to be a board member. And I'll be honest with you, Shane, when I left that meeting, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know I can do this. But, I mean, yes. I see the success that his community was having, and so on a whim, we did it. And I think it's kind of instilled in me because it is instilled in me because my mom and dad started, they've had teams throughout our district, well, it's within our community, and they always brought the community together. And I grew up with that. So I kind of used that as, you know, foundation to be able to do what we do now. And obviously coming into the board, and I really got to say this, every board member here has been a help. You know, I see the way they are and how they you know, they are with their communities. And, you know, I kind of model that same way because, like I said, coming into this, I had no clue. You know, I think, you know, I've had discussion with Ms. Lucero. One of the hardest things to being on the board is getting into the weeds. You know, like we talk about where a board member, where's that line? Where's that line? And, but I'll tell you what, the way the district and Dr. De La Torre has run it, it's easy to say, hey, let's do this the right way. And they follow the right steps. And all that coming together has just really been a good thing for me, knowing that before I got on the board, it was very scary, knowing what that board was going through. And I'm like, I don't want to be in that drama. But at the end of the day, you know, this group right here is for me has been heaven sent because they are good mentors. They're good people. They care about kids. And that's the consistency. Mm-hmm. This board cares about our children, and we have a superintendent who's been here for a while. The consistency that this collaborative board has is what our success is.
Wow, that's neat. And so really, you Mr. Haggerty, kind of opened your eyes about here's what you don't know. If you don't mind me ad-libbing a little bit about running for the board, it was kind of intimidating. It's almost like, I think I want to be a teacher one day. Oh, really? Well, let me tell you what teaching is really like, right? Yeah. Yeah, it was truthful. Yeah. Yeah, they asked me to come talk to about 50 potential substitute teachers in my district. And I said, I'm real proud to talk to you all. We appreciate you. But I commend you because you're taking on a job where you very rarely get a restroom break. You got to be on your feet all day long, so you got to be in pretty good shape. You're dealing with kids that are glad that there's a substitute. And I went on and on about how difficult it is to be. And my HR director came and told me, he said, Dr. Duran, we don't want you to talk to them anymore. But 4 or 5 of them said they don't want to do it. but it's good at telling this. Sorry for that story, but it's good that you got it's even commendable that even given the full blast from Mr. Haggerty, and this is what you're in for, you were like, I think I'm going to be up for that. Yeah.
Real quick, after the meeting, I tell Mr. Haggerty, so what's the pay? You don't get paid for this?
Uh-oh,
I'm like, what?
yeah,
That's a part-time job here.
yeah. Yeah, actually, the pay is you got to give a lot of your time, so that's a payback. Well, congratulations, that's good. Hola. So but we haven't given you a chance to get a coffee or anything. We're going to hit you, Mr. Rosales, right between the eyes with a little introduction activity. Tell us what we're doing is, we've got your name, but think about why you ran for the board initially, and what's something that you learned about when you got on the board that you really didn't anticipate, like, wow, the wow factors, like, I didn't realize this.
Well, the first thing, I've said this before, what triggered this interest was the fact that there was a bond being presented way back in 15 or 14, whatever it was, and I couldn't figure out what in the devil are these people doing with the money. Now, I'm not aware about the budget. I'm not aware of anything. I mean, I've been doing my thing for 50, well, not then, but been doing my thing for about 40-some years in the business environment. So I inquired, and then coincidentally, a person called me and said, would you be interested? And I said, well, not really. I need to check into it or look into it. And so I met with Arlinda Valencia, and then she kind of gave me a breakdown of what she thought would be important that I consider. So I did, and so it took me about 10 days and think about it, and finally I called her. I said, wait a minute, one of the things that God has given me is perception, and it's because I've been on the streets for a long time. And I called her, and I'll be very blunt with you people here. I said, I will consider running, and I will take your help under one condition: you don't own me. When I make a decision, I don't need to be called by you or anyone else to either give me your approval or disapproval. Under those conditions, we'll go. If it has to be that we can't, then I'm out. And never did I entertain the thought about money or any of that. So I did, and got in the night that we were celebrating our election. I thought it was for 2 years.
So that's one thing you didn't know.
That's another thing I didn't know. And so I was surprised it was 4 years. I said, Jesus Christ, 4 years of this thing. So all of a sudden, I'm in, and initially we had some very trying moments with an array of personalities were on the board. And thank goodness they eventually were put out, through the course of re-election or non-re-election. But one of the things that I immediately picked up on, and I had been on other boards, I've been on several of them, and this is a major ship. Then I found out the immensity of the dollars that we spend. Well, simultaneously, as I go to these meetings, I see all these other people involved, and I say to myself, you know what? Now I know why some of these clowns are involved. There's a lot of money involved here. And so simultaneously, if I go back, Dr. La Torre, through his leadership, put the new bond together, and we actually that night that bond failed. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, no, if we're going to do this thing correctly, we need to go back to the community. Mm-hmm. The community is going to be the one that needs to be totally transparent as to what they're doing or what we're doing. And so that's the way it went. It was very well organized. They had them in this room. They had several sessions. So the community literally told us what were the true needs of our district. And this is, as I'm going through this thing, I'm learning the tremendous amount of responsibility that's involved in sitting here.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, keep in mind that while we're going through this thing, I get called by that same person that helped me get elected and becomes very critical of decisions that were made. And I immediately picked up on the fact that that person has crossed the line. And she continues to. On about 4 different occasions, she called and questioned employment of certain individuals. And I think I brought it up to the board before. We're here as a governing board. We're not here for chismes. The chismes belong to him. You know, if we can't trust him, then we picked the wrong guy. But thus far, it's been working out real well. And the reason I mention that is because I want to make sure that this board understands that you're elected as a free spirit, a free minded individual making decisions for the betterment of our children. Overall, this board has done that. But we cannot continue to be influenced by some of the circus sentiments that are here every once in a while. One of the things that really bothers me right now is having to dip into our reserve fund. I've been criticized out in the public that I was against the pay raise, the most recent pay raise. I was not. What I was afraid of is the amount of money that we're now expanding. We have been given, from 15 that I got on to last year, we have increased the pay $25 million a year. This last increment went up $29 million. So where does this thing stop? And the other day, when I made a presentation in Eastwood Middle, a teacher immediately wanted to know why I voted against it, and I responded, I think that's a very good question. And I went ahead and reiterated some of the negatives of continuously putting out this money. I said, what I'm trying to do is protect your job. You got car payments, you got mortgage payments, and if you keep going to the well only has X number of dollars. We were at 45,000 students. We're down to 37,000. So the pool of money keeps getting smaller. And we keep hammering this cash layout. And what I'm afraid of is one day we're going to come to you and say we're going to have a rift. And you don't have a job. And so those are the realities that I've confronted myself with, or at least I've come to grips with and fought. There's no demons. I think I speak pretty much on myself and what I feel and express myself accordingly. But I feel that this board has done a very, very professional job. Some of you, you know who you are, do a good job. You go through things before the materials, and some of you don't. I know that. I'm looking at everybody.
You can look at me
but
when you say
the
that.
point here is we're here to make things better. And sometimes in making things better, you have to self-criticize yourself and say certain things for the betterment of the entire group. I think that's about it. I think I'll go over to Kip.
Well, you know, you're pointing out something that is, in my opinion, it's subtle about leadership. That's huge, and people may not anticipate going in, and that is, you know, because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, there's going to be a lot of learning about the budget, but there's something more subtle that's even more important. The question is, how do you handle criticism? Because if you're going to step in the arena, I'm not even just looking at it, I'm talking about all of you. The thing about leadership, superintendency or whatever, is if you're in this to make people happy and to become popular, this is not the best place to be. And that's a very, it's a thing that we ought to teach children about leadership. You're going to be criticized for whatever you do, especially in these times. I think that's something that all of you share. And we'll talk a little bit about that, especially as we get into the ethics about supporting the board, because you're not suffering from, well, yeah, that's probably too strong a word, but you all have to manage that criticism. And I know that, you know, if you're not prepared to, that would be my advice, and I'm more of an administrator, obviously, I've never been a board member, but it holds true for you as well. That'd be my first question if somebody said, I'm thinking about becoming a principal or a superintendent. Well, can you make that tough decision, be willing to be criticized, and still treat people with respect and honor and things like that? So thank you for sharing that.
I just say that I live through criticism daily in what I do.
Yeah.
And rejection.
Yeah.
Rejection is part of my life. And so you have to learn to live in.
No,
Move on to the
absolutely,
next one.
and stick to your beliefs and your values, because, by the way, people are quick to criticize, but they're really slow. If somebody thinks you're doing a really great job, this is what I found in a leadership role, they're slower to, it's like a survey. When you give a survey out, if you're really happy with a product, you usually don't call in and say, I give this a 5, this is really good. But if you had a problem with it, you're quick to fill out that survey. So keep that in mind. You've got a lot of fans out there that are appreciating you being in the grind and are better off that you're here. So that's good. Mr. Ochoa, your turn.
Okay. My perspective on being on the board is a little bit different from most of them. I have a different background, a very different background. Mine was working on the railroad for 18 years, being an electrical engineer at White Sands for 23 years, and a teacher now for the last 5 years. So my background is very diversified, and I bring to the board all of what I've learned from all those different occupations. But the reason I ran for the board was really by chance. At that time, they were in that situation where Ysleta wasn't doing so well. And my wife got caught in that spider web. She had troubles with the school board. Well, not the school, the district. And that time, teachers were being dismissed readily, and they were going to level 3 pretty much on a constant basis, almost every, you can verify that, right? Yeah, and that attorney was making tons of money off of all these things, and my wife got caught in that spider web. And I was taking her to YTA because she was consulting with YTA president and all that, and I took her and I back, and then one time she comes out the door and says, "Hey, Mr. Ochoa, would you come in here?" And I'm like, "What?" And she says, "I would like for you to run for the school board." I said, "I have no idea what the school board is. I know they're up there, that they make decisions, but I have no concept of it." And then she was telling me about the inequities that were in the district, and I saw them. I saw them firsthand. And I decided okay, I'll run. Well, the first time I ran against my opponent, I lost the election by 42 votes. So I thought that was over, okay? I think I ran with you the first. And I said, well, it wasn't meant to be. But 4 years later, I ran again. I was asked to run again. I said, okay. And I was successful. I came on board. And it has been an eye-opener. It's a little bit of a demanding job sometimes that has no pay, but it has a lot of rewards. Each individual here brings strengths to the board, different strengths. Businessman, kindergarten, grade school. She has the social, emotional heart that she brings to the board. Mr. Haggerty over there, he has, technical. He's a techie as well as being, everything else. Mr. Ramirez, he brings to the board his perspective from his background, especially with EPCC. He has been very valuable in that respect when we consider all the programs that EPCC has. And, of course, my vice president, Mr. Bustillos, his wife is a teacher, and as well, he's very strong and positive for athletics, which this is very diversified. Myself, they call me the numbers guy. I can look at things and analyze, and that was my job from previously. I was an analyst. So when I came on the board, I was overwhelmed by all the data that we were supposed to look at. Not only what we had to read, but also the data that they were presented to us. And after I got, hey, I can do this. I can understand what they're saying. So when they present to us, and Dr. De La Torre knows, and his staff knows that they're going to be asked questions, whether it be on data, on performance of our children, or if it's budget, or if anything else. I always try to look at it a little deeper and ask the questions. But it has been satisfying to be among such a good group of people here. it wasn't the board that it was before, and that was one of the reasons I ran, was to make a better environment for my children, my grandchildren, because they go to school here in Ysleta. And I've learned that it's not only my community that I am concerned about, I am also concerned about the community below I-10, which I hate that. I hate that term, that below I-10. I think we're all El Paso community. And I came from Jefferson High School, and I know some of the inequities that we were subjected to down there. So, but talking to Dr. La Torre and my fellow board members, we all have the same goal, to educate our kids and give them the same opportunities that in every school, that so they can maximize on their education and their potential to be a benefit to our society. And it is shown. I mean, I was really, really pleasantly surprised when we got that A rating. And that goes to show that it's a lot of hard work from our teachers, our principals, our custodians, our bus driver, and it all works, like Mr. Haggerty said, it works, it's like a clock, you know, different things going on here and there, athletics, robotics, and all these other things, cross-country, football. I mean, everything is just like clockwork. And of course, at the head of the realm is Dr. De La Torre. I mean, he is ultimately held accountable for it. And I think that this board here is strong because of our strong beliefs that we can work together for the betterment of our children. That's it. No other agendas or anything else. We are here to make sure that our kids get the best education possible, not only in Texas, but in the nation. And that's our goal. I mean, and our teachers show that. I mean, they are proud of what they have accomplished, and we are proud of them also. Well, our kids, because they've accepted what the education that they're getting at Ysleta. They embrace it. So, and it shows. Yeah. So, I'm very honored to be here. Also, as their board president. I mean, I was never expecting this, but we have endured some tumultuous years, you know, with a pandemic and everything else, and our tragic shooting here at Walmart and everything else. This El Paso has endured a lot of negative situations that could have derailed us, but we've all stayed positive and strong for our community, and I think that shows here with each individual here. So,
Wow, that's, I mean, I can't, let me just kind of wrap that up. Well, we are going to go over our board operating procedures. We need to, but I think the most important things that happen with a team are some of the things that you all shared here, that you have a lot to celebrate. I mean, I work with boards, as you know, with TASB, and when individuals get on on boards with a single agenda item, particularly if it's their own particular needs, at the cost of the rest of the board, y'all have seen this here in Ysleta, personal agendas. And it's more common, I think, than it is rare. I hate to say that. So there are a lot of board presidents that reach out to me, a lot of board members. I was at Central Texas School Board Association, and a lot of those boards are really suffering. So I think you should celebrate your contribution to this A rating. Do not underestimate that. The research is very clear that boards that are responsible, boards that hold the superintendent, administration accountable for high performance, the research is very clear. It does trickle down through the organization, even though you're pretty far removed from the classroom. So, you know, I encourage you. And one more thing that I hope that you are, and let me also mention that I sense from you, I hope that I'm accurate on this, that you, and this really is a model board for this, is that you are comfortable in disagreeing because you respect each other so much. I think that's huge. I was raised in a family of 7, and I had, you know, 3 sisters, and there's one sister that I just got along with more than my other 2 sisters. I don't know if y'all can relate to that. And my little brother got along with the other 2 sisters that I mean, we all got along. Now, we So we resonated toward one another in two different groups, but I'll tell you what, we all shared the same values and respected one another, and we know where that came from, right? That's probably, I don't know if that analogy works, but you might want to think about that you are, and we'll talk a little bit about culture in just a second. Mr. Rosales, were you going to say something, or?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. That's it. I just want to commend you. And a couple of you have mentioned, and I think this is important, I think what should inspire you is, and sometimes I get emotional thinking about my career and working shoulder to shoulder with some of these people who are just giving it their all for these kids. You run into them, they're coaches, they're teachers, they're, the custodians, their heart is in it, and they really, really need you to hold them up with good leadership. So, I commend you, and y'all are really, really a big part of your the performance of this district over this last year and the last few years. That's it, Mr. Rosales.
Dr. Duron, I'm going to make a comment, and
Okay.
it's not directed at anyone. It's just a general comment that I feel. I'm very much for El Paso.
Mm-hmm.
About 4, 5, 6 years ago, we were selected as an honor board.
2018.
18.
We're almost
And so we get down to Austin, and I was new to this thing, and so I thought, well, maybe they're going to interview us and da 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 da. Well, the decision was already made. Grapevine got it. And so when you made those comments about how well we are functioning and continue to, and how dedicated we are to the children and our attitude towards the board, the betterment of our children, I feel that TASB, somehow or other, can't seem to look over at this side of the world. I was very upset. I waited for that president. He wouldn't give me time until Friday at around 6 o'clock. And I'm like a bulldog when it comes to things. I'm like a pit bull, really.
Yeah.
And they
They're meaner, right? Yeah.
yeah, I mean that. And they kind of, and so consequently, sometimes I get those magazines, and they don't mean anything. It's the same white guys with
Yep.
the same blue eyes. I'm not knocking down the white guys and the blue eyes, but it's all them. And yet where's dark skin, but we're every bit as capable. So I think my message to you is that as you go around with you, and I know you're quite influential around those circles in Austin, let them know that we know. You see, like I told him, the ball's in your court.
Mm-hmm.
You think that I look at you, I think you need to look at us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we continuously are kind of just, well, they're in El Paso, just, maybe they were lucky and what have you. I don't think so. I think in this community, one of the things that I will tell you this, and I learned this from Microsoft CEO, astonished with the caliber of students that we have here.
Yeah.
Astonished. He was totally blasted by the fact that we have such amount of talented young people. And so when you get to Ysleta, we prepare them to the best of our ability, A rating, et cetera, et cetera. They leave us, our tax base is high, et cetera, et cetera. Abbott comes and gives us a song and dance about economics.
Mm-hmm.
When we have maybe 2 corporate headquarters here, Dallas has maybe 350, maybe 400 now. And so the disparity continues. The oversight, well, they're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced that way back when I was in the military. So I know what it's like.
And I can take that message back, but I would say a couple of things about that. And I think you would agree, it's not why you do it, for that paper, that trophy, or the plaque, or whatever. We understand that, because we've already shared why we're doing this. However, it's nice to be recognized. Number 2 is, that's one thing I really, and I'm not just trying to placate, that's one thing I love about being here. I'd jump at the chance to come down here and do any kind of work with Socorro, con Theo, because one of the things I learned, because I'm not from here, about being here, is the pride of the El Paso area. I learned when I was here, we're not the stepchildren, but sometimes people forget about us in the far end of the state around Austin. So that's just part of it, But I think more recognition could be given, because the results speak for themselves. But I think, and lastly, I would say that I hope that you go out into the community and say, and talk, yes, about, you should sell the brand of the board and not let people assume or take for granted is a better, that we have a good board. In other words, every chance you get at the grocery store, whatever, if they complain about it, say, well, you know, we disagree sometimes, we do that, but I support the full board, I'm part of a team. Because that message gets out there. That message really does. It's, and by the way, one last thing, because I want to jump into the ethics and go over those very quickly, is I hope you understand this is not, and y'all know this, you're pretty sophisticated, to be quite honest, in your team strength, but it's not about 7-0 votes. It's not about all hanging out together on weekends and all. We're all very different. We've already pointed that out. But we're going to talk today about some of the things we share, including, so that's kind of a segue into the ethics and our board operating procedures. Again, not because the wheels have come off, but if there are some things we need to tighten up on those wheels and even take it like from good to great, as the book says, then that's our goal. Okay? Yes, Mr. Ramirez.
I'd just like to have a couple of comments. One, before we got the A announcement, we had, Xavier had shared with some of us, and the fact, his conversation with Commissioner Morath about how long it was going to take for us to get ourselves over this, this hurdle. And, I think that speaks a whole lot to the leadership all the way around. Xavier came and asked us for control of certain things during the pandemic. And, and I know a couple of our folks here, we had trouble with that because that's our responsibility. But the other side of it too is that, we were competing with every school district in America and actually in the world, trying to procure things, trying to identify resources, trying to do this or that. And when the opportunity came up, it was, he had to have that in place, and we had to trust that he was doing the right thing and that he was going to get back to us and talk to us about it. And I think he certainly earned that trust. But I think that the mere fact that the conversation he had with the commissioner and where we're at right now speaks a whole lot. Now, I will tell you that also puts a lot of pressure on us for next year, because we still want to be able to take that victory lap and enjoy that moment. The other thing too, and this was important, some of the best moments I've had with the people here and with DLT have been the quiet moments, after the meeting or having lunch or even going to the conferences. I know we get criticized for spending money for that, but even those quiet moments sitting there sharing a Dr. Pepper, doing those things. And one day he and I were talking, and I don't remember on what the environment was, and we were talking about equity and how to define equity. And I don't know if one of us had beat him on the head or were looking to beat him on the head. I'm not sure. We were talking about, and I remember us talking about that, about, the needs and stuff and how to address it. And he told me, Sotero, he says, and I don't know if you remember this, but it's as clear as day to me. It's not about making sure that everybody gets the same X number of dollars, same $5 for every school. If your school needs $7 to be successful, then that's what we need to do. If this other school over here needs more help or needs more mentoring or needs more this is what we need to do. And, in my mind, that's true leadership, is recognizing the differences and responding to it differently, So when Charlie comes back and says, why can't all my schools get those extra $2? Well, you don't need them at your other schools. You have a blue ribbon school over here, And so I think that, to me, that was an important conversation in my mind in addressing the things you need. And I've got one of those schools that's had a number of challenges and a relatively new principal. And I'm going to tell you, the district or DLT and Dr. Chacon and company, they have stepped up and they have really put the effort in. And when that guy got his score, I think he was more shocked than all of us because he could not have imagined that we would be here. And when we had that luncheon that day, I was over there talking to him, and I said, and he was like, Mr. Matus, I'm sorry, we'll get better. And I was like, dude, from where you were a year ago to where we are now, I'm thrilled, you know, I mean, we were like, what's his name? Is it Sisyphus, the guy that's pushing the rock up the hill? Sisyphus, you know. I tell you what, we were like that, you know. He was like that, not me. He was like that. And let me tell you, he just nailed it. He just nailed it. And the district continues to support him and continues to make the adjustments and stuff. And so I think your definition of equity went a long ways with me, and I still remember that.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh.
Very good. Mhm.
And I think what he just said about that principle is pretty much the thought for not only here for that board, but for the whole district is we can do better.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thinking and the perception of everybody in our schools. We can do better. Maybe not this much better, but a little bit better than this last year. We can always improve on what we're doing, and that's what we're trying to do, is also improve on ourselves as a governing board. And it's amazing where they came in to where we are now. I mean, it's been a long journey, but it's been worthwhile.
No, I think that's another message out to the community is y'all all are messaging. Yeah, we're real proud of our accomplishments. And even to the internal, when you talk to faculties, if you're at events and things like that, to message to them, we're proud of where we are, but we as a board need to get better. I'm just echoing what you said. It messages we're all trying to get better because the principals are telling, the superintendent's telling the principals that on down the line. And for you all to be a part of that and joining in that continuous improvement, man, that's very, very powerful. It helps that principal who's dealing with those struggling teachers that are pushing back on getting better. Hey, even our school board is modeling this, all right? Our superintendent is talking to us about this, and I'm talking to you about it as a teacher. Part of the Ysleta ISD culture is that everybody gets better. So that's really, really strong. Let's, if you don't mind, let's do the ethics, and we'll take a short break, if that's okay. Can we do that? You have the ethics.
Yeah, but I'd rather take a break.
All right, let's take a break right now, just real quick. This has been very, very good. Very, very good. We'll
Coke guy. No, no, thank you.
We have failed in 7 years.
Put a lime on top of it so I don't get shamed into drinking.
Really?
You make up for it?
You came over? Came to the dark side. He's a Dr. Pepper guy.
Only when I'm out of town. Only when I get wild.
Oh, yeah, whole, like, one drink.
You seen him? Hi.
That's like one of the iced tea.
We are back in session, as they say, right, Mr.
Yes,
President? Okay, so we have before you BBF Local, Board Member Ethics, and boy, I want to commend you for that. I like the little acronyms on the side there. Equity, trustworthiness, honor and conduct, integrity, character, and commitment to service, student-centered focus. That's pretty strong. If you all don't mind, I don't know that we need to, I'll just ask that you look over, I'll give you a little bit of a chance to look over them. If you haven't done this already, highlight or put a mark by one you want to just emphasize, talk about, brag about, change, whatever. But I think that's a big part of this exercise. So with that said, can I give you just about 5 minutes, just kind of look it over and make some notations, then we'll talk about it. Oh, here. Yeah, I printed this off. I'll give it to him. Okay. Okay, we're going to, Mr. Cho would like to make some comments, yeah.
Yeah, just to speed up the process. I know that we're the society, but to tell you the truth, I really hadn't really looked at this in detail like today, and I was astonished. I'm astonished because I will be fair, just, and impartial in all my decisions and actions. I can't say that I have not seen that being not part of our board meetings. I think everybody has pretty much lived up to that. I will accord others the respect I wish for myself. I mean, this is amazing. When I was looking down the list, I was like, I was going to check off, oh, well, we'll do this. Or, look at it. I pretty much checked off all of them that we follow. We all follow this. Have you really looked at this before? Oh, yeah. In detail?
Yes, because Mr. Haggerty will remember that
Oh,
we
well,
had
you
to
guys wrote it.
sign.
Oh,
This
you
is
guys
the
wrote it
same
up.
list that was in there. and
It's
they-
not the same list. The one that we have in that boardroom from 2012 is much more aggressive and
Oh.
much more
Yeah,
like things that you wouldn't expect to have put in there. It's more like a board for a prison with prisoners as board members. And,
he's
and
right.
on that list, I think maybe one or two of them were followed and the rest of them were broken.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, and
And
just,
most of the people that were just reading it, like me, Mr. Haggerty, we were just like, no, I don't do that, no, I don't do that. But then the people who were pushing the signing of it were doing it.
Yeah, they were playing
So-
bingo, done that one, done that one, done that
yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But what I'm amazed is that, well, like me, I really hadn't looked at it this in detail, but just seeing, we follow pretty much these code of ethics, well, for me, unknowingly, that we were doing it as a group because that's who we are, you know? Just like the one that says here, I will refuse to surrender judgment on any individual or group at the expense of the district as a whole. That what Mr. Rosales was just talking about a while ago. And
For me, the most impressive one is the third one, because Dr. Lerone, you were talking about, you don't have to have a 7-0 vote.
no,
But what is really cool is knowing how other boards work, whether they're high functioning, low functioning, whatever, you really don't see what you see here, and that's, there's someone who's not comfortable with voting yes on a certain thing, and Mr. Ramirez will pick up on it, or someone will pick up on it, and like, well, what would it take for you to vote yes on this? What changes would you want to see? And that ability for this board to compromise and to listen and to be open and figure out ways for everybody to find consensus is tremendous. And that's, I think, why we have as many 7-0 votes as we do, is because as a board, they're willing to work on it and follow that third bullet point.
And that's what I was going to offer. As you go into the review of your board operating procedures, in my research and in my brief experience, there's no doubt that these are strong board operating procedures, but they were created for the purpose of controlling individuals on the board by overstating and being unnecessarily concise as to how one could, should be expected to behave. So when you have a high-performing board like this, 80% of what is written in these operating procedures are intuitive. That's just the way, that's the way an effective, high-performing, cohesive board would automatically treat one another and work with one another and understand that there are going to be thoughts and beliefs that deviate from maybe even the general board. But back in the day, when I first joined, and I think it was President McLean, Ms. Reyes, and Mr. Pearson, were insistent that I have these almost memorized and prepared to interject at any board meeting should someone deviate from.
Well, and
Yeah,
also-
like I became the
that's really
parliamentarian
not- that's not
for
the
their board
superintendent's
meeting.
job.
No. And I was like, well, but it was, so this was developed TASB did it, by the way.
Tasby?
TASB. But it was created specifically with the input of certain individuals to control 3 other individuals on the board.
Are you referring to board operating procedures?
Yes, sir.
The ethics, or both?
I'm not sure about the
Yeah,
ethics.
with the
I was
board
just saying, as
operating-
you
we go
start
through
going
both,
through
yeah.
it, one of the things you're going to see is, do we really need to be told that you should probably do this and that you should probably, not bring an item to the board more than 2 times in any given year?
6 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have board operating procedures, but this is almost as if they don't believe you have a brain.
Do we have to have a policy like this, or can we just have a statement?
Well, you can have just a statement. Yeah, you don't have to put it in policy. Because, when you violate these, you violate policy.
Right.
And that's pretty serious. Because, of course, you're supposed to abide, as the district, all the employees have to abide by the policy. That's why we have it. I was a little bit surprised to see that you have it in your policy. I would defer, though, and I know that TASB has their critics, but I think your policy consultant can really help you with that. Whether, if you want to take it out, I'd ask her to give you some consultation on that, because it would be a big move. But yeah, I mean, you can, it's up to the board, obviously.
Well, I can see what he's saying, but for future years, no telling what things will happen after we have all gone on to other ventures in our life. Maybe it would be good for the following boards to have this in place, and if it, just to keep them on track.
No, I agree. I want to elaborate on that a little bit. Sometimes, sometimes really good teams don't know why they're good. Sometimes families are really, really close, and they think all families are that way when you think about it. And if you ask them to define, why is this board really such a good board? What's your secret sauce for doing that? I think about how many of these things that you mentioned just as we went around and talked about how important it is and how proud you are to be on this board. My point there is don't take these for granted, and if they are crystallized like this, if you get, say, 2 new board members, Mr. Ochoa was telling me that the last election, 4 of you were reelected without opposition. Let me tell you something, that says it's working. That's a message out to the community that that board is hitting the ball. Let's not start coaching them with other what they should be doing, because they're really knocking it out of the park. Look at their ratings. So I would say this is your, when you indoctrinate any new board members coming, you don't know what you're going to get. But we were going back talking about earlier, the things I didn't know about getting on the board. If you were to show this to a candidate, say, well, if you want to run for the board, these are our board ethics. And are you willing to abide by those? Because that's the hard work. And I might look at this and say, oh, you mean, well, I got to tell the truth. I'm being a little silly, but you mean I got to, I'm being a little silly, but I have to do, it's like if you're going to join our team, these are the things that we do. We don't go out late night partying with the seniors and all that the night before a game. I'm just making stuff up as a coach. But if you can't be a part of that, we as team members are going to call you on it. That's another thing I want to mention, is that if you're joining this team, don't be surprised that we're such a tight-knit family. We're going to call you out if there are any violations on this. And because we're all human, even you 7 might think, wow, I did kind of touch the limits on that. Maybe I didn't show enough mutual respect to my fellow board member in that meeting. Maybe I did kind of cross the line and avoid personal involvement activities the board has delegated to the superintendent. And, Mr. Rosales pulls me to the side at breakfast or something and say, hey, Robert, you kind of crossed the line a little bit there. This is your guide. That's what keeps you really strong. Families, well, trust me, in my family, we got corrected pretty quickly about crossing that line, right? Did you want to say something, Ms. Rossetto, or?
Yeah, I think too that we have, policies, pretty intense policies for our teachers. We have intense on employees and our students, and while a lot of this may seem like common sense, and I understand, do we really need this because we are a great board, but I think it's important because these are public, and it also helps the public that we're held accountable to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And before we segue to the board operating procedures, I want to stay on this ethics just for a couple more comments. Don't take them for granted, because not a lot of boards have this, and they need them. They really do. B, to me, this defines your commitment, because anybody can show up to a meeting on time. Anybody can really do their homework and read the board packet. Those are yes, they're time consuming, they're very taxing on you. These things here are very, very difficult and challenging to some who may enter the board. So they're a little bit different than the board operating procedures. One more thing I would say about the ethics is the thing about morals and ethics, even with staff members, I've learned this way back, is you can't really police ethics. Ethics is a personal thing. When that vendor, and I'm going to go to the extreme, we've talked a little bit, you see in the paper and boards in the past, when that vendor sits across from you and says, look, it's just me and you here, for a vote, and shows you an envelope with some money in it, no one will ever know, right? So my point is, the ethics happens in the quiet of the night, where no one's watching, and it's very personal, so it's hard to monitor. It's hard to even discipline people to do that, because it's a personal thing. But I think, I agree with Mr. Lucetto, the fact that they're here, when I was prepping for this, I was like, wow. Thinking about some of the boards that I've worked with, this would have been a really good guide for me to fall back on that we did not have. Mr. Wasillos, then we'll get to you, Mr. Rosales.
Just a quick comment. I think this is definitely something that teaches us history. This is where we were, and this is what came up of it, and where we don't want to be, and we continue to follow what we're going, and this sets a standard again, elections are coming for the incoming board members, if we ever get it. So I would like to keep it.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't referring to this is already in policy. Yeah, I was talking about the board operating procedures.
Oh,
that-
I'm sorry, yeah. No,
Yeah,
that'll have to
that's
be-
where I thought that there's a lot of things in here that are, that were done intentionally to corral.
They were.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the folks that you mentioned, when we were reading through them, the vice president at the time said, wow, these are great. I don't know why we never bothered to, we should have looked at these a long time ago. Who would look at these? Maybe a member of the board, since it's board operating procedures.
Well, and it doesn't hurt you at all. It strengthens you to visit them every now and then. Don't let them get too far out there. So, I don't know, once, twice a year. We're doing it now. Yes, Mr. Rosales?
I just want to share this. This correlates, well, let me just start this. Way back when, I got invited to a party called Vietnam. In the process, I was a draftee and what have you, and through necessity economically, I went to Officer Candidate School, simply because I'd get about $200 more a month. But the other day, my wife was cleaning some of the stuff that we have, and so, and I have a film, and this correlates so much with the code of ethics that we were ingrained with in the officer corps. And to this day, that was what, 67? And that stayed with me. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm not saying that, but those are the things that have stayed with me. In as much as that, then I see the group of people that were here before we got here, and the fact that they needed a police officer to monitor the meetings. And so this is what a group can deteriorate to by the fact that they haven't looked into and accepted certain ethic procedures. Ethics, like you said, you either have them or you don't have them. So anyway, I value this thing. This is very.
Well, good. So I think it's by consensus, we keep them in there. It's not necessary to edit them. If nothing else, let's pay, more attention to them. We don't have to post them on our dais when we're up there and look at them every evening, thank goodness. Some boards really may need to do that. But that's really, I think, your real strength. So with that, let's move on to the board operating procedures. I'm gonna take a little bit of a liberty here before we jump right into those two. And I just want to open up for a brief discussion because we really need to get on these operating procedures. And just kind of give you a sort of an analogy to set this up, because here's where I'm going with this. No matter what rules of operation that we have, and I want to hear from you, someone has to have oversight of a team or an organization or whatever to make sure that those rules are followed, right? I mean, someone has to do that. Ideally, you all take ownership and kind of policing one another and kind of checking one another, right? Let me kind of give you an example of that just really quickly. When I remember when I was a boy, a young guy who was from across the town in Waco there, he wanted to come spend the night at my house on a Saturday night. And so I told him, well, if you're going to be there Sunday morning, you better bring what?
Shoes.
A Bible? You better bring what?
Your dress pants.
Why should he bring dress pants?
Because church is
Church,
part of the,
right?
part of the agenda.
Okay, now I want to point something out just really quickly. That we didn't practice this or whatever, but that we all connect on that one experience that on, not everyone, because I'm not passing judgment on somebody that didn't go to church, that's not the point. But if we all believe that young man should bring dress clothes, right, then we connect culturally. Does that make sense? We all can have that experience. Now, he might say, well, maybe you all won't go on Sunday if I come that morning. What would be your response if somebody said that to you in your home?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh,
If
yes,
you're
we're
with
going,
us,
right?
you're
In
gonna
other words,
go.
there's no
Yeah.
question that when you enter this culture of the Duran home, and it's yours as well, there's no question that we're going to follow this. So with that, and I just, as we set up for these board operating procedures, but it's not that's the action that we took, but the underlying value that we all share, if we can relate to that, is a Christian value, right? That some may not resonate with everyone. And so as we go through, and I think your ethics really point out your value, but one of the things and this is the thing, who had oversight in my family about that value and then the action that followed that value? Who do you think had oversight of that?
Mother and father.
Yeah, and I will say it was more my mother than it was my father, okay? Now, my father, he was a golfer, and he'd take me out to go with him, and we'd go to like 5:30 mass so he could make his 8 o'clock tee time. So he practiced it. But it was my mother that really had oversight. And in her actions, I mean, she did her little vigil every night. She'd pray the rosary. I'm maybe giving you too much information, but this is the way I was raised. We'd watch her. We didn't disturb her at that time. She had her little altar there, and when I wanted to make the All-Stars, I said, Mom, I hope I make the All-Star team. I'm going to light a candle for you to Saint so-and-so. I said, well, I need all the help I can get, so go ahead and do that. But the point I'm making is that that value is really what made our family really, really strong. I mean, it wasn't just so much that it was Christians, that we practiced that. And if you come into this culture, but the point is she had oversight. Just really quickly, so if you take that to a classroom, okay, teachers that struggle with their students and those that don't, they lack that sort of, in setting that tone and that culture in that classroom, they lack stressing those underlying values to those kids that bring those kids together. Now, one of the things I did for my mother is that he didn't have to come over to my house for her to tell him that. I'm the one that told him that as part of the team, right? In other words, I am policing that sort of value and that culture and that practice. You better do it. Well, you think you can talk your mom out of it. There's no talking to her. I'm telling you, and I want you to come over. You can't do that. You can't come over. Well, in a really strong classroom, those kids you may not know this. You're the teacher. You've seen it. They'll police each other. Like, hey, man, you better not do that because the teacher, you're new here. You better not do that. So they're policing each other on that mutual respect. We don't say, shut up in this classroom. If you're new, I'm going to kind of take care of that. That's where I think you all come in and kind of policing these board operating procedures. Now, generally, at the campus level, the principal sets that tone, that culture. This is what we do and do not do to the new teachers, whether it's ethics or our operating procedures on this campus. And generally, the oversight, going back to my mother, the oversight person, I call it the keeper of the culture, okay? They have to have certain skills, but more than anything, they have to model, like my mom, the vigils every night, whatever, they model that value more than anyone. Does that make sense? And where I'm going with this, where a lot of boards struggle, and I'll segue, because you could ramp it on up. It could be, so we have the classroom, we have the campus, and even the superintendent sets the tone for the district. What's important, right? Coaches. And coaches, they model being on time. You better be on time and work out, and that coach is sitting there with his whistle. He's the one that's on time, so he's modeling that. I had a student tell me once, I had a student teach me this. I'm sorry to go on about this, but it's important. I had a student tell me, he came in and he was late for class. And he said, you know, Mr. Duran, I was an assistant principal then. It was tough middle school then, but he came in and he said, and I said, why aren't you ever on time? This is the third time I was getting on him. He said, well, sir, to be honest with you, we don't even start on time. I was like, so he's teaching me, right? And I said, that's impossible. Come with me. And I walk him to the class. It was 10 minutes in now, and the teacher's still getting her stuff together or whatever. Why would I be on time if the keeper of the culture is not modeling punctuality, right? And so kids will teach you things like that. And so the thing is, if the keeper of the culture, so as a board, generally, the keeper of the culture, generally, who do you think that usually falls on? It really, yeah, I would say general knowledge, first of all, it's not the superintendent, because the superintendent is not a board member, right? Now, certainly the superintendent in any district can share. Now, the superintendent is the keeper of the culture for the district, okay, but not the board. And so I want to spend time talking about this because I'm not selling this at all, but I want your feedback. Maybe not at this meeting, but even as I do a session called Leading Without Authority, okay? Some of you may have been to that. And the best teachers, coaches or whatever, they don't need the authority. There's a saying, I don't fear that person, I fear disappointing them. Those are like great teachers, well, my dad was that way. I didn't fear him, but I didn't want to disappoint him. And so with the board, I'm going, I really prepped for this for a different board, to be honest with you. But I want your feedback on how I can improve this, because some boards are dysfunctional. And what I have found about boards that are really dysfunctional, and I say this in my session, that there aren't dysfunctional boards, there are boards that lack leadership. Okay, now leadership can come from anywhere. One of the things I'm impressed with, I'm not trying to impress, but I am impressed with this. I'm not trying to, just say this to make you feel good, is that you all have a sense of ownership into this culture, a buy-in that's super strong. We're all human though. As we go through these, and we will now, and I'll just won't go on about it, we have to allow the president or someone to call us on it if we step out of line, because we're human on the board operating procedures. We have to give them that authority, but at the same time, we expect that person to be a model for us and to be those things. So I don't know, any comments on that or questions before we get into the operating procedure? It's no good to go over rules if we are not going to, follow up on them. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Well, I've always had a slight problem with authority. So I think I feel a little conflicted in that way. I think I've had, maybe because I experienced negative authority as I was growing up.
Yep.
But I feel that we do a great job of holding each other accountable. I even remember a board meeting, 2-3 board meetings ago. It was a very intense agenda item, and Sotero, he said, I gave you your time and let me have my time. And, I was feeling very passionate about it, but he was right. And I respected that about him. So I think having that openness, to take personal responsibility, but two, to also be able to comfortably hold each other accountable. Now, if it gets to the point where you get sent to the principal's office, then we need to do some intense work. And there's also situations where I don't think it matters. If that person doesn't have that personal integrity, personal accountability, it's not going to matter what the board president tells them. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I feel just really conflicted about that part.
Well, let me make a couple quick comments about that. First of all, you can be given authority and abuse it, right? In other words, I had the authority to tell this kid, it doesn't matter what that teacher starts on time or not, I'm going to give you, you're going to go to detention. Like, hey, I'm just trying to communicate why I'm not on time. I mean, really. And so that's an abuse of authority, right? And it can be misused.
I think more for the board. When I first came on, there was a board member who it didn't matter what anybody said, from be it the administration, be it fellow board members, be it the board president. That person was going to be disruptive, continue to ask the same questions in a different way, continue to just cause havoc at that board meeting. And I don't know if that was something that just was beyond repair at that point. But I don't think that speaking to the president, and I don't know if at that point the president did speak to this board member at any time, but I want to assume that they did. And it didn't get anywhere.
Yep.
I mean, sometimes you just have people that are difficult.
No, I want to, and we really, this is good, but because I want to make something else also clear. You're not necessarily going to reach everyone, okay? We're having this conversation because you're not there. Some boards are really struggling with this now, especially right in this political climate where people are running for just a special agenda, right? And I call it, it's a new term, I just call them, they're unreachable. It's like, if you say there's a cup sitting here, I'm going to say there's not, right? And it's just like, okay. But I think that you can isolate them. Not so much you can't come to our meetings or whatever, but I think if the rest of the board member is really strong on these ethics and these board operating procedures, first of all, that's all you can do because that's all you can control. You don't control any other individuals. But and the other thing that makes the boards really, that's really challenging is the reason I call my sessions leading without authority, because like if it's a baseball player who's just not following, even if he's your number one shortstop, and he or she is not following the expectations of the team, the ethics of the team, whatever, fill in the blank, I, as a coach, have the authority to sit them on the bench or even remove them from the team. And what makes it tough for the boards is you can't really remove that person. Now, you can sequester them. And by the way, in your board operating procedures, it shows that the multi-layered discipline. I saw that. But even then, he or she can still go out in the community and raise havoc. But I think to the extent the way the rest of the board, you can't do it without them being a part of it, obviously. That's just not legal to do that. But how you all manage an individual like that, because you could get an individual like that. But a lot of boards are struggling with that right now, especially now. They have one or two they just don't know what to do with.
I think going back to that, and we say this a lot, we are a body, and without the body, decisions can't really get made. That need to get done, or you make decisions as a body. And so that body needs to be able to do things for the best interest of everybody that's involved in the district you're representing.
Well, and let me also point out too that I think we're talking about, I shared this with the board member the other night, that you and I can agree on an agenda item, okay? What I'm not agreeing with you is how you went about it with the other board members, because I'm with them when it comes to the ethics and our code of conduct, okay? But I'm not with you on your behavior, okay? But I will vote yes on this, and you vote yes. I'm just using an example, right? That's different than saying, than those that go 3-4 split, and we're all going to behave the same way because it's us and them. That's different.
And wasn't it, an item is passed, you get your booty on board with that item?
Yeah, so I want to just distinguish, I'm not talking about, I'm not going to agree with you on this agenda item for, I don't know, whether we're going out for a bond or something. I still agree that we should, but I just don't like the way you were treating Catherine in the meeting, is all I'm sharing with you. Those kind of conversations, again, happen one-on-one. This is what makes you strong. Now, again, I'm preaching to the choir, quite honestly, it sounds like. But I think being reminded of those things is part of this team-building activity, yeah.
Yeah, really, all I wanted to say is, I think that having your board president as the father figure or the mother figure, the person that's kind of over, is good, just because if it does break down, I mean, so far we have a very good relationship where that, like she said, that people will say things and we're able to do what we need to do amongst each other. But perhaps there may come a time, even for us, when the board president does need to step aside and say to one of us, myself included, I think that was a little, of course, they would need to be diplomatic, because I think when you're in these situations, it's not right.
Right.
Because literally, under the other president, not Mr. Haggerty, but under one of our other presidents, I was literally called into the superintendent's office and pretty much, not Dr. Delatorre, no, that was before Dr. Delatorre, and reprimanded for something, basically, and it was the superintendent and the board president there, and then they dared to say, oh, I think she's a little insulted by this. You think?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the thing was that they were even wrong in their assumptions of what they were trying to do. They were just trying to corral me and put me in. Right. So we have to watch that level too. But as far as interacting with each other, I think that it's better that it starts between us, like you're saying. But then if necessary, it's good to have people that are able to step in there and say, you know, maybe we should talk about this kind of thing.
Was the superintendent, I'm sorry, was the superintendent present during that?
Yes.
That in itself
Yes.
was,
Right.
Yes.
That in
Well, and
itself
of course,
was
this is,
wrong.
I was a brand-new board member, too. And if I had to do over, at this point in my tenure, no, it was Dr. Pettis.
Oh, it was, okay, you're right.
It was Dr.
They
Pettis.
were horrible to her. The way they would
Yeah.
gang up on her in closed session, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, oh, well, we appointed her, but really, I mean, but the thing was that if I had to do over, I would have politely said, no, I will not be attending that meeting.
Yeah.
You know, I will not be attending that meeting. Thank you
And you
for
could have also
whatever.
told her, and you don't need to
so-
be present if I do.
Well, I could have done that, but like I said, I was brand new, and I have to say, being a teacher,
Yeah.
the superintendent's position
Yeah.
still seems higher to me than just whatever, you know, everybody else, and then her being board president. And so I'm just kind of like, okay, yes, ma'am, I'll be there. And then, boy, yeah.
Well, you know, the fact that was it a he or she president?
She?
A she that needed the superintendent there, in my opinion, I don't know these individuals, so I'm free to say this, was sort of you agree with me, right? And I guess the superintendent's like, yeah, I guess, so call her in here, we're going to reprimand her.
Exactly.
I think that is a lack of my ability and skill to have that conversation with you. And by the way, let me back up. First of all, am I modeling what I want you to do? Is you know, I can't just reprimand you if I'm the one that's part of the problem, right? It's like the teacher modeling punctuality. Why would they follow suit, right? But I want to segue into something that I want you all to think about that's a part of that a lot of boards, when I do this session about leading without authority, that the reason I think it's gaining popularity is because they recognize that we're not the same board when our president changed. I mean, I see heads nodding in the audience. I've had people come up to me afterwards and say, I had one after this session, I'm not selling the session because we're doing a part of it here. He came up to me and said, you know, I'm up to be the next president in 6 months. And I got to tell you, Mr. Duran, I'm going to tell him I'm not ready to be the president after I shared with him. Because think about this, and I'm not saying this to promote President Ochoa as the reason, because the reason this board is so solid, but I would not take for granted his leadership or anyone else that wants to step up in this role. You remember we talked about if you want to be a board member, there's tier 1, that's do the right things, but tier 2 is you're going to have to be a certain person, right? And that requires the ethics and all of this, in the quiet of the night and all that. But I think to step up and be the board leader, it's a whole new dimension because you have to be able to have those conversations in a very effective manner, right? We know this as administrators. We don't reprimand people in front of other people, but if it's a really serious problem, we call them in and we leave that person with respect, mutual respect, right? Ideally, you would not want to disappoint that person, but we're going to have that conversation. Those are the skills that a board leader really needs to have. And you don't have to be president. You can be a board leader in that role. We have some boards that actually begin to, they assess who has those skills among the team as their choice for the next president. That president will help groom that individual. That's a really good thing. But some boards, and I was a victim of this in San Antonio, that they just rotate the next person up. And let me tell you, we went from the same 7 members, we went from really good meetings, mutual respect, a lot of things you were doing, and overnight, and this is not about my scar tissue or what I've been through, it's just a fact that leadership matters. Stay until 3 a.m, yelling and screaming at each other, and the only change was the president. I'm not exaggerating this. It's like, what happened? Well, it's because that individual was not willing to have those, you can fill in that blank. They were not following board operating procedures themselves, so everybody just kind of scattered. And it does. I mean, a disciplined, if you want I'm using the analogy, if you want all the kids on time, start on time. The rest of that story, by the way, is I did tell that teacher that. I told the boy, get in here. She said, where's his target? I said, don't worry about him. I want to talk to you. Step out in the hallway. From now on, I want you to do one thing. I want you to start the classroom on time. And I'm directing you to do that. I'm just using this analogy. She started doing that, and I'm going to come around to check. She started doing that. Guess what? Her tardies just went down. And she came to me and said, it worked. Well, but there's a sad ending to this. She got off of that discipline because she was a discipline herself, and it just fell back to where it was. But the point is leadership matters. Modeling it matters. I tell folks, what's your advice to people who have discipline problems on the campus? I said, well, it starts with having undisciplined adults. The kids will fall in line. We know that, right? So back to the board. What do you do with dysfunctional boards? I ask superintendents when I run into them, how's your board? Oh, man. And I ask him right away, who? Is that what you said? And he didn't really mean that. He just said that. No, actually, I've had this talk with Xavier, and he's in a good place. I mean, and some boards will say they're really great. You know what? And it's the same thing works. I mean, now I'm getting a rambling about this, but it's interesting. Ask the superintendent, how's your board? They are awesome. They are great. How's your president? She is incredible. I mean, there is a correlation here. How's your board? Oh, man, I don't know what to do. They're split. There's this. How's your president? Oh, he's part of the problem. Right? And so I don't mean to go on and on. I want you to two things. I want you to be appreciative. I'm kind of glad he stepped out of the room of at least, yeah, he's human, he's got faults, of the leadership you're getting. And second, because we want to sustain this is a free agent. We all know this about superintendents. They can be gone tomorrow, and that's part of it. But the board, really, the sustainability of the board is key, and a big part of that is honoring that leadership and the requirements of the board president, because they are different than being a regular board member. Very good? Yes, Mr. Rosales.
I just about forgot what I was going to say.
Well, that's my fault.
It took so long. No, I just wanted to, as I sit here and I listen to all this thing, that's how this ship was broken.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my point is, the ship was broken, and now we're sitting at an A rating. When you put things such as this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, somebody has to be the keeper of the culture is the whole theme of that. Let's jump into the board operating procedures, because we want to get out of here on time, right? Yes, sir.
What time are we leaving?
Did you have a recommendation? Okay.
At 3?
We have lunch coming at noon, and we'll probably be finishing up shortly thereafter. So if you want to eat your lunch
Yeah.
here, great.
Okay.
If you want to just grab and go, I think we have Jimmy John sandwiches for
Oh,
everybody.
boy. Hey, so can we just do this? We have 14 sections. Can we just do this one at a time? You kind of look over it? Or if you've got notes and we just go through each one of them and stop on some that are sticky, some that we want to talk about? I don't want to go line for line. It's going to take too long. What do you think?
I noticed that we kind of changed the policy. I don't know when we
Yeah,
changed
tell me
it.
about it. Tell
But
me.
it was for putting things on the agenda. Maybe my eyes are deceiving me, but before it had to be, two.
Can you tell us where you're referring to?
When I
though?
came on, it was two,
Page two,
so that way
two.
for sure you had a second at least.
Yeah.
And then they changed that
Yep.
when, I guess they weren't able to do stuff, and it was just anybody could put anything. And then when people were just putting garbage, that's when it got changed to 3. But then the problem is, I need 3, so I ask you and I ask
It's like a
Sotero.
quorum.
And Sotero says, nope, now I can't get it on the agenda because if I talk to Connie, now
Yeah.
there's 4 of us. So if it's 2, then the rationale is, at least you know you have a second, and at least you'll have the opportunity to discuss your item.
But what I'm saying is I don't see it on here anymore,
Now, I don't think there's anything in there as far as how to get it on there.
which I think.
You send
well,
it
you could
to
just be
Cruz
a-
and hopefully somehow it makes it on there.
No, well, you can be a board member and put a policy item on the agenda, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, actually, you're referring to, where was it?
Did
You
I
need
lose
1 or
it?
2 people to put it back on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Or
After
to
it's already
put
been
it-
discussed.
No, I'm.
No, this was to put anything, like I
No,
want
to
to
put
put
it on
something
the
for.
agenda.
Can we do this? If you're going to point something out, let us know what,
Policy
Yep.
number
Reference it, yeah.
1A
yeah, okay.
on page 2.
And
think out of all these little ones, the best one that I found was 2 or the board president.
Yeah, and I remember that, or we had to get permission from the board president, but I,
But even then,
Okay.
it's 2. If it's you and the board president,
So now
it's
it's-
2. But the president used to be able to just put stuff if they wanted.
but now we don't have to do that, is what I'm saying, it's not in the policy.
I don't think there's
That's
anything in the
okay.
policy anymore.
And I think, and personally, I think that's okay that you're able to put things on the agenda if you need them to be on the agenda.
I think the only problem is just like what Shane said. If something happens and we turn board members over and we get some other people with these they're doing these things to either police the other board members or it's a self-agenda.
Right.
And
that's when we would have
we
meetings that go
literally,
till 1 in the morning.
he's right, we literally would sit through these board meetings and discussions would go back and forth over the most senseless things. And that's why it's good to keep it to where that if you're a board member that wants to put something on the agenda, that you need at least one other person to second it. And that way it will eliminate some of that.
I think that has a double-edged sword, because there could be a board member, even using the example of the dysfunctional board in the past, there could be 2 board members that they get along very well, they're always gonna put their own agenda items on the agenda. Whereas you have this and it's open, you could put your item on the agenda, but you can't keep bringing it up, and we still have time limits. In our policies, there's time limits to
You
discussions.
can't do it like
3 minutes,
twice in 6 minutes. The 3 minutes thing was because of,
twice in 6 months.
we
and
put that
then-
in there.
So,
Yeah.
so one of the things I highlighted on this that I do like, as most boards will do, you got to discuss the proposed action. That's not what you're talking with the superintendent first, even before you go to another board member, really. And let me tell you why that's important.
We always discuss it, Dr. Dutton.
Yeah.
I think that's a unspoken, part, without even knowing which, I did read that part in this glimpse here, but we always discuss with Dr. Dutton, hey, this is a concern, I would like to see this.
And so the reason I think that, the reason I highlighted it, based on my experience, is that sometimes I bring an item to the superintendent's attention and I'm misinterpreting the data. I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. You go, oh, really? Well, then don't put it on the agenda, right? That superintendent or his administration will say, no, let me meet with the board member. That's not, does it? And the board member could come back, so that's okay. It doesn't, I misunderstood the whole.
But then what's nice is we have safeguards for that too, because in order to get something on the agenda, it has to be at least 9 days before.
Yep.
And that gives the administration time to see it and catch it and say, wait a second, let me call them up and make sure they still want this on the agenda once they hear.
Yeah, and I really do. I mean, I know we're going to try to get through this. I think it's pretty vanilla. I mean, it's pretty template as far as, in my experience with putting things on the agenda. I think you're pretty solid there. Your Monday prior to the regular board meetings, this is really, really strong. It keeps it very well organized. You don't have people scratching their heads, how in the world, including the superintendent, how did this get on the agenda? Right?
Xavier, do you have take a look at 183?
183.
Yeah, that's the one I was gonna bring up.
183?
We have asked that.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's a violation of law. I think that's what they're saying, is that if you ask someone to put something on next meeting's agenda, because it's not agendized for the current meeting you're in, you're conducting business at the board meeting for the following meeting. But a board member could, after the meeting, come to me and say, hey, the lady that came up during public comment, I think she's got a really good point. I'd like us to discuss it at the next meeting. Now you've not done it in open session where the only things you're supposed to talk about are things that have been agendized. But on some boards, especially those that are dysfunctional, what you'll get is this. Somebody will say something, they'll turn to the superintendent and say, I want to see that on next month's agenda.
Yeah.
I think we've done that
But-
before.
but
No,
it
I
was-
think we have done it, but
But it was within the
unintentionally.
confines of what we were discussing
Yeah,
already.
I think it was within the confines of what was on the agenda,
It wasn't
though.
something.
It wasn't like off the charts, oh, by the way,
Yeah.
next month, we're talking about cafeteria food.
Yeah.
And then
It's not in a negative way. I was gonna say, if we can we continue to do what we do, but have that as other business? or something? Are we able to?
No, I think it violates open meetings
or
because it
still-
wasn't
oh,
posted.
I don't know.
Well, so,
I guess
What we do right now that I think works really well is whether it comes directly from you, and it does sometimes, and you say, I'd like to discuss this further, I get an email or something like that. I reach out to President Ochoa, I said, I'll tell him, Trustee Ramirez would like to have this on the agenda at next month's board meeting, and I've also spoken to Trustee Bustillos, and he appears to have some interest in it, and Cruz is good about saying, go ahead and put it on the agenda. The other thing that we typically are very open to, even some of my cabinet members, if you're having a conversation with them, they'll come to me and say, we may want to bring clarity to this issue because there seems to be some misunderstanding, misconception, not only for the benefit of the board, but also to repeat it so that the community can hear it again, so they know that what they think is about to happen isn't actually what's about to happen, which goes along with what you guys do really well, and that is sometimes you ask questions where you already know the answer. But you're not doing it for your benefit, you're doing it for the benefit of the public. And that's how I've trained cabinet to be responsive to those questions, because don't think that it's a silly question, or don't say, I just had a meeting with him on Friday and I explained to him on Friday what we're doing and why we're doing. I said, he's not really asking because he doesn't understand. He's asking because he wants to make sure that anybody who doesn't understand in the public gets the same answer that he got, so that they don't call him and ask him again. So a lot of, like I said earlier, a lot of things that we do, because we've been together for so long, which, by the way, is something else that's somewhat rare, is we're pretty intuitive about the way we conduct business.
I think what number 3 is kind of referring to is an example would be Connie's predecessor when Dr. Dow was talking about Algebra 2 results. And his question was, so anyway, the floors at the basketball gym in Bel Air are this and this and this. And it's like, that has nothing to do with these Algebra 2 results. Well, then we need to see it on the next agenda. Well, you can't, because nobody ever discussed anything regarding Bel Air's basketball gym in the agenda, so we can't discuss that kind of stuff, and we can't ask to see it during a board meeting. You gotta go through the regular procedures.
That's what I was trying to say. I was just trying to say, oh, yeah, we had so much drama. Yeah, but it's just like, you're on, like I was going to say, cafeteria food, and somebody says, oh, yeah, by the way, I want to see, like he said, Bel Air's floor at the gym needs to be replaced, and I want to see that on the agenda. It's not on here, and we can't discuss that. But on the other hand, if we're talking about cafeteria food, and we say, you know what, I would really like to discuss at some point the types of food that we're serving in the cafeteria, which is still on topic, that is within the boundaries, and I think that's what this is referring to.
Yeah,
So I would just add one more
It's like bringing that
comment.
agenda item back again.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that on occasion, and I think you're right, Catherine, we have sort of done that a little bit, but typically it's a full circle thing, or he'll jump in and say, we're reviewing that right now. When we get it, when we get everything all gathered up, we'll come back and report to the board. And so that puts us in the position of us not asking for it, him saying that we're considering things. So.
And I think Dr. La Torre does a good job of protecting us, in a sense, to make sure that
from
we're
yourself.
not.
Yeah.
He keeps that job as parliamentarian.
We need that help.
So does legal, Mr.
Yes.
Safi and
Mr.
Susan.
Safi and Ms.
They always keep
Austin
us
are
within our
excellent.
bounds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'll make just one more comment about this, just to kind of remember that if you have if you need more information on something, you can ask, of course, the superintendent. I think you said this earlier, but it doesn't have to be an agenda item, right? We can get a report on the maintenance of the floor or whatever and the expected date to end it. We don't have to bring it up at the next meeting. I think that's really what that's speaking to.
Can I just add that, when I get riled up about something, or I just get passionate about something, or something just really bugs me, no, it's riled. I'll call him up or I'll text him and say, hey, do you have some time to talk? And he'll sit down with me. And usually about 75, 80, 90% of the things that are in my mind. He's got working, or, we're all looking in the same direction, which is kind of nice. And I appreciate that. So, I can tell you 100% of the time, most of those things do not end up on the agenda. It's just like, oh, yeah, we took care of this, we took care of this. It didn't need to be a board action. Mr. Bustillos is asking for the same thing, or Mr. Bustillos called me and expressed a concern. So I think that goes a lot with the communication we have with him. And so I appreciate that, because like I said, I get it in my head, and I know I made the poor guy crazy because he was trying to get out of town for something, and it's like, I want to do it Friday. I'm going to be out of town. Can we do it Thursday? Yeah, let's do it Thursday, and that worked out really well, and we took care of business.
And that's why we typically have 90-minute meetings, 2-hour meetings,
Yep.
and really the definition of a board that is dysfunctional and ineffective are those boards that stay going back and forth until 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. Let me tell you a distinction of a board that goes to that late is they're placating to the audience versus having a business meeting. Yeah, we won't get into the depth of that in this meeting. but
Grandstanding.
Y'all are sitting disciplined in that. I want to jump to page 3, number 8 at the top. Boy, I wished I would have had this, because that I love the recognition. Sometimes those can go too long, and you're like, my goodness, every kindergartner in the district's walking through here and getting our picture. I'm being a little facetious, but this allows you to tell that principal or a community member, no, we don't do that. We have a criteria for recognizing kids. We want to recognize kids, and by the way, we can do that on the campus, right? But not at our board meetings, except for these criteria. Number 9.
I had a comment on that, or something to ask the board to consider that kind of goes against it in a way, and that is, I don't know if any of you guys have gotten like a state resolution, and it's usually just from one state rep, and it's really neat, and it's very professional looking, and it's just, it's cool. It recognizes the hard work that this individual was recognized for at the state level. I was wondering, as a board, if we did that, where we had the ability to do 2 or 3 a month for people in our community who've met some type of criteria, but it doesn't have to be presented at a board meeting, but it can be approved either through administration, and then individual board members are allowed to give out 2 or 3 a month. And an example would be the LB and Sons guys. Like if we were to give them a, what do they call them, resolution, that only Cruz sent out because, they're in his community, they did stuff for Hanks. And just something nice that then they can take back and hang on their wall. But that doesn't take up more time at a board meeting, but at least we have the ability to recognize those folks on our own time or at the school or whatever.
Actually, I've seen it twice. We saw it Tuesday at City, I've seen it twice. We saw it Tuesday at City Council, and then Ysleta High School. Principal Caladona and myself and the Stuco kids, we went and accepted a resolution from the commissioners for the Ysleta's 95th anniversary. So that was kind of cool.
What I like about it, and what we've been doing whenever there's been some resistance and someone has directed me to the board operating procedure, I always take them to the last bullet, because I said so.
Because I said so.
Yeah, but they're not first or city. They're not second. I always say, don't worry about it. And I'll tell, and it's usually PR. They've got to do additional work. They've got to do additional preparation. It's sometimes bullet 4, because I'm asking you to.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking too is, as individual board members, giving them out, limit it to like 2 or 3. So at election time, and it's February or March, and I've got an opponent, and I go give out 300 of these, then no, but. Right. But if you can do, and it's, it's fairly consistent, you do a couple here or there.
I like on number 9 that the oral reports are not to be over 8 minutes. Gosh, I wished I'd have had that in my board operating procedures. And I did that on my own with my own staff. You will not go over 8 minutes, but I like that it's here, because you can tell the superintendent, again, you don't know who you'll have as superintendent, your staff's talking too long. We need to cut that down. That makes your meetings go long, right? And it disciplines them, so I like that.
We lied.
We've had that.
We
I
lied.
was gonna say
We've
that
had
would
those
be a lie.
conversations.
Look at the last line. Except
Yep.
budget, health insurance,
Yeah.
academic assessment, and others deemed necessary by the board.
Right, but There are some times that I
Yes.
pointed out to you that some of it was a little excessive where they could have,
Yes,
you
there
know, especially, there were some, the presentations, like, these could have been cut down somewhat.
Well, and you know, staff are high performers. They want to talk about what they're doing. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I say, I'm going to signal you. I don't have a hook, but I'm going to signal you if you get carried to your PowerPoint, you get carried away on it. If you're a little too proud of what you're doing, I'm going to let you know, right? It's just the art program at the elementaries, okay? We don't need to be talking about 30 minutes.
But
I'm being tacky,
I
but
will say about his cabinet that he has some folks that are, well, they all are.
Yeah.
Incredibly, they're exceptional. I was going to say passionate about what they do. And when they've had conversations with you leading up to this, and then you by chance missed the meeting, I know I did. And I got a call the next day. I had a great presentation, you missed it. I'll go back and watch the video. But I think that's important as well, too. Can I ask a question on number 9 here? And I'm throwing it out. I've seen this routinely. TASB proposes it. I know that some of these trainings for boards and stuff, and they talk about the fact that our agendas should be 50% of the agenda or some large percent of the agenda, more than 50%, should be focused on academics and those sort of things.
That comes from the,
Lone Star Governance.
yeah, Lone Star Governance. What was that fellow's name that does the training?
AJ Craybill?
AJ Craigle says that if you're discussing the color of buses, anything other than academic achievement, numbers, subgroups, subpops, subject areas, that you've deviated from your mission. Your mission should be almost exclusively student outcomes, whatever outcomes this board has outlined as being the priorities. Don't take up your board meetings doing, what's some other examples that he says, property acquisition, a lot of stuff that just intuitively comes up. It's impossible to do the 80% academics, 20%, the rest of the stuff. Because y'all have an interest in your constituents, have an interest in how we spend the money, where we spend the money, why we spend the money, what property are you selling, which school are you closing. Under AJ's model, all of those things would be under consent. You'd go, they'd all go forward, and then you'd spend, about an hour talking about academic achievement, benchmark assessments, interim assessments, how are emerging bilinguals doing, and boom, meeting's over, because you guys are all
But
about
Dr. Athon,
academic achievement.
I kind of, and I don't know if you were pro or not pro when you were saying that.
You know what, we went to the first Lone Star training, or governance thing, and I think Connie was there, I don't remember who else was there, but we went to the first, and Mike, we went to the first one. I was very, very impressed by that, this perfect world. But the other reality too is that like budget month is budget month. And we don't need to be doing anything else but budget, because that's so huge, And so I understand those things like that. I think that when we do the academic reports, when we talk about the, what's the TARP report?
Oh,
Somebody saying that right?
Taper.
Taper.
yeah.
When we do the taper report, we have to do that, one, by law.
Yes.
Right.
And two, we want to hear this stuff. And so I'm not hung up on 50% every month, but I don't know. I kind of agree with the
Quarter.
concept of, we talk more about academics.
I
And
agree too.
one of the things, I have told this story many times over, not so much to this group, but to other groups, I have been called about sports teams and football fields, and even one of the local church leaders called me over in a restaurant complaining about the press boxes and the conditions of those at the schools. I have never been called on academics,
Yeah.
and the reason, and we live and die by these academic numbers, I mean, this year more than ever, we know that. And so, I don't know, I think that if we're gonna hold him accountable, he needs to tell us, hey, we did the benchmarks, guess what? It's not pretty.
I think like each quarter, I think we had discussed this before, because I remember Naleo mentioned it something too a couple years ago, before COVID, whenever it was, talking about the exact same conversation. I think every quarter is okay, and it's okay if it's data-driven and the presentation is long and there's a lot of data, but I think it's important data for us to really digest and understand and take back to the community and say, hey, this is where we are, and this is what, we could also be the driver of making academics more of a priority or a topic.
You know, and one of the topics I would have liked to have seen is that, you know, we took great pride in the number of, you know, over 50% of our schools were A, you know, or ranked it with an A, or 90% plus. But for those that were Bs and for those parents and community members that were interested, what are we as a district doing about the Bs? But more importantly, what can the community do about the Bs? What can we do to help gauge? And one of them, and you talked about it during convocation, kids got to come to school every day. You know, that's the only way they're going to get better. They come to school and they work at it, you know. And so, like I said, I have really struggled with this in my head because I'm going, there's no way we can do that some days. You know, we have to do the business of the district. But there's other days, I think, there's other meetings where I think we need to spend the time doing that. And maybe even if we just started like with once a quarter type thing.
Well, I know
would
that Dr. Chacon sends you all those long, lengthy spreadsheets from the interim assessments and the, you know, but they're thick. So what we need to do then is figure out a way how to condense it, make it more concise, abbreviated, get right to the point. We're either doing well, we're either growing, or we're not. Right? You
I
never
also
stay the same.
think it's pretty important, just like we've said before, even though we get those results, that somehow or another it's presented so that the public hears it too. I know when I go to different community meetings, I do tell them about things that have come up like that, how that we're doing and that kind of thing. And although that's not usually the first questions like you're talking about, they are happy to hear, oh yeah, you guys, you did that? Yes, this is what's, you know, so I think it would be good, like they're saying, once a quarter to.
Well, I mean, I think just we're going to wrapping this up on this section, but I think the hard thing as a representative is that I want to honor that constituents' concern about the press box. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, can we put it on the agenda? We don't have to put that on the agenda. And to AJ's thing, his frustration, it probably doesn't happen here, is you talk an hour, you talk 45 minutes about fixing that press box. And some of the board members don't even care about that press box, quite frankly. I mean, they do. That's not the point. But over time, if they continue that, it's like, when's the last time we talked about student performance? That's kind of his thing. And one thing you could do is you could even have a staff member that's just going to be at the meeting anyway. Over time, you could chart a pie chart on how much time you spent, not at one meeting, because it may be just finance, but if we've gone 6 months and not talked about test scores or whatever, we're in trouble. We need to talk about that. So one last thing is you can tell the constituent, well, we'll look at the press box, but, and I want you to put it up at the next board meeting. You could tell them, I'm not going to put it on the board meeting. It's not an agenda item. Because we want to stay focused on student performance, right? That's like go implement this at your next football practice. Well, no, that's not. We're not going to do that. We're going to stay focused on the game plan.
Let's finish with what you're saying. You know, it goes back to understanding the position of a board member.
Yeah.
We're not here to micromanage the press box.
Yeah.
And my take on that is I've turned it over to administration. Dr. Latorre is very aware of it. We're going to address it that way.
Well, you know,
Because my press box doesn't mean anything to his press box, et cetera, and then you begin to micromanage.
Yeah, I'm part of it.
The whole key here is a board member, you're not here to micromanage, you're here to steer the ship in the right direction.
So the member on page 4, let's go move on. We've got ground to cover. On page 4, member conduct at board meetings.
Page 4.
No, you're not in the weeds. These are important things to talk about, but we want to try to reach our goal before, maybe we have a working lunch.
Which one?
How's that? Page 4, member conduct during board meetings. Any concerns there?
I couldn't hear you because Sotero was talking.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's a
Talking about
timely
conduct.
comment.
It was a good story, by the way.
Voting on page 5, I think that's pretty, again, straightforward. That's what good boards do. I highlighted, no, I didn't highlight things. Yep. Mhm.
Robert, I just, we haven't had too much of it here. We've had a little bit in other districts. How passionate the community has become on certain issues.
Sure.
And they show up at the board meetings with signs and chants and stuff like that. How, have some districts taken a different approach other than just warning them and then escorting them out type thing, or? are
Yeah,
they-
those that was in here too. Yeah, I mean, they are escorting people out. I mean, when you can't disrupt the meeting, and we're having a business meeting here. But yeah, I mean, the short answer is, yeah, they're getting pretty serious about folks that are given a warning. The board president gives them a warning. And then you can recess, so there's not a lot of drama. Y'all can go into your room when you recess, and then just go over, talk to security. I want those two people out of here.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. And then, but to have a yelling, that you're yelling and screaming at one another, of course, again, I'm just preaching to the choir. If the board members are involved in that, it exacerbates the community to do it, right? Yeah, well, I mean, you know, if.
That's what happened in this district.
When we kicked out all the teachers?
Well, no, when certain individuals, Tomato and this other guy I mean, they came here to fight.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that was pretty.
And so how much business was being taken
well,
care of for the children?
if the board members come into the meeting to fight, then we want to go see the fight and be a part of the fight. So we won't get into the details of that, right? But that's kind of what happens. However, the reverse of that is that they sense from the board that the board's not tolerating that kind of behavior, all seven of you. It sort of mitigates that, you know.
And I think that's pretty much prevalent, that we as a board are very much into listening to what's being said, but we're not going to get to the point of disruption or causing any havoc, because that's not going to lead to anything. No decision will be made based on that, I mean, or intimidation or any kind of that. We've gone through some tense times, let me tell you. But we weathered it, and we weathered it well.
You know, what was it? One board member said that our board is highly functional. We're accused of being boring.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. That's what you want. You want, now, we disagree, but we want to see a good fight. What happens on a campus when there's a fight? All the kids want to go see the fight, right? Trust me, I've been through that, right? But you know, do you want to run for the board? No, they're all business, man. I don't want to do that. I want to go fight with somebody, you know, right? The opposite of that is true, is that if they're fighting, it says, well, I can fight too. I'm going to be part of that board, right? And so you just recruit them. Hey, I'm on 3, board travel. I'm just trying to move us on.
No, great.
And by the way, it goes back to the ethics. There it is, right there on the first line. I'm on 3. I'm on page 6, Roman numeral 3. Board is expected to exercise ethical stewardship of public funds. The key word there is ethical stewardship, right? You're being watched. You've heard of board members that have been videoed while they're on the beach at Florida during sessions, and their families on the beach, and the news catches them and all that. All of that is a bad brand for the board. So I hope, I also highlighted, so that's just, I mean, it could almost end there, ethical stewardship of public funds when you're traveling. When you're alone, this is where vendors try to corner you a little bit. I call it, see if there's a crack in the armor a little bit. Hey, go nudge your superintendent to do this, go do that. Well, we don't do that. You go talk to the superintendent. I'm just putting this out there. Because if you entertain the, well, yeah, I think I can get this pushed through, and as an agenda item, as whatever, the vendors love to hear that, because they are going to see how far they can get with the board members. Literally, I'm working more and more with vendors in my role with Dallas now, and they keep an eye on the board, and the superintendent. If they may go back to their camps and say, we've got Rosales, we've got Woodruff, we've got Lucero, now let's go work on Haggerty. And somebody go take them out to dinner, let's kind of work on, y'all know this, you've been a part of that. So I say that because that typically happens at conventions and conferences when they're all there. And so be mindful of that. Remember your board ethics, okay? And by the way, the opposite of that is true as well. Is that, man, when you go to that Ysleta board, they always turn us back to the superintendent as a vendor. We have a process for that. I like your product. I'm impressed with that. I've talked to other board members who like it. But you know what? I'm only one of 7. Then they go back to their camps and say the opposite. Says, man, those guys are tight as a drum over there. That's what you want. Do you, yes, you entertain the possibility through the superintendent. I'd like to hear them make a 15-minute presentation if we're considering new furniture at the campuses. I was impressed by them. That's different than saying, let me see what I can do with the superintendent. That's not what they need to hear. Got it? Okay, good.
I have one question
Yep.
that's on a different pathway. We're traveling now, and and it came to my mind because of all these cancellations of flights and everything that are not part of our regular expenses, that we're asked to stay, they cancel our flights and then we have to stay overnight and the airlines won't pay for it. How do we have to use our own credit card and such. Is that reimbursable?
Yes, absolutely. If it's beyond your control.
Okay.
Now,
And there's
for-
other, there's a, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Then there's other times, like if we were in, like last time, we were in Austin or San Antonio, and we were there in the airport almost the whole day waiting for our flight. 12 hours. And we were getting desperate. If we didn't get on that flight, some of us were talking about renting a car and just driving ourselves down here, which is, again, something that wasn't budgeted for. Are those-
Well, no, that's perfectly understandable. The abuse comes when I'm visiting my padrino, and we're going to play golf, and that's why I stayed the extra day, and I'm putting it on the district's dime. It's like, what? The convention ended Friday,
Yeah.
and you came back Sunday. And so I want to be reimbursed. No, you can't be reimbursed for that. You can be reimbursed for, that's personal business. But this was beyond your control, and that's happening a lot now, too,
Yeah,
especially with
with too
flights.
many cancellations. and
No, I mean, it's
A lot of things come into play, the per diem, the travel,
the meals.
Meals, everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you keep a receipt of those.
It goes back again to your principles.
Yep,
The money, the $400 million budget is not our money.
right.
It's the taxpayers' money. We're here to be the stewards of that fund. And I understand circumstances where the airlines are, what they do today, but that's beyond our control. But as long as you keep in mind that this money is not your, our company is the same principle. Our money we get is not ours, it's the policyholders' money. And the money we get at Ysleta or any of the school districts, it's not their money, it's not our money, it's the taxpayers' money. And so we have to make sure that we administer it accordingly.
Misappropriation of funds is I call it the top fold headline on the newspaper, right? People love to hear it, they don't like to hear it, but it's a juicy item and so you don't want to get caught in that. I don't, y'all have a board secretary who helps all your arrangements and stuff like that?
No, not the board secretary, but
well,
we do have admin.
She helps with the.
Yeah, she helps
Yeah,
with
she
Keep you out of
is the
trouble,
board
receipts.
secretary,
Yeah.
and she works with us.
Okay,
Yeah,
take care of you, man. We had that too as well.
I think as long as we follow policy and in extenuating circumstances, like I pointed out, I think we're okay.
I'll give you a good example. I can't make the meeting next week. And so I was told, well, why don't you just go to the dinner? I don't feel right, to fly into dinner and come back. I'm wasting that money for what?
Yeah,
For a party?
that could be questionable, yeah.
I don't want to do that.
You're going there for the training.
Yeah, but I can't do that because I've got some school activities that Friday. And so, or I can't go Thursday and come back Friday and then fly back out.
Well, my rule of thumb is I don't want to have to explain anything to anybody with a microphone in my face, right?
Nope.
So keep that rule. That was always my rule, my staff's rule. Yeah. Reimbursements, you seem to have that taken care of. 4, trustees' participation in others' entities' function or meeting. Now, I don't have anything highlighted on that. That's pretty straightforward. Former trustee participation in ceremonial procedures. Handout diplomas at graduates, yeah.
Yeah, DLT, this is for you. We have special participants participate in graduation, and one in particular, Ysleta del Sur Pueblo. We do that. Do we have to do anything special for that? Is that part of our rules, or is it just something just a practice that we've accepted?
No, I think it's just at your discretion, but one of the things that they want to do, I guess, is honor past board members. So sometimes we get requests from former board members who are having a relative that's graduating and they'd like to be up on stage, and we've always accommodated that without
And they
any
flip over the
problem.
table of diplomas.
Huh?
And they flip over the table of diplomas.
Oh, yeah.
One ruffian that did that.
It wasn't on purpose.
That was before our time.
No, it wasn't.
And you're right, see, of course.
Yeah,
I want to make a comment on
Okay.
that, and again,
Running.
when issues happen, and let's say it happens in my district, my issue, I think I should have the respect of the other board members. If they want to get on and do things on TV, fine, but I need to see that if Charlie has an issue with whatever it might be at your school, you have the podium, so to speak. We'll support you, but the podium is on you. Instead of I from Eastwood jumping because I want to get myself on TV and all this and that. That's, again, going back to respect,
yeah,
okay?
yeah. You defer to your colleague to do that.
Yeah, I won't go any further on that.
So ceremonial procedures, we're solid on that. Yeah, everybody wants to be part of, I'm sorry, I actually told a state legislator here in the 11th hour he couldn't be part of Socorro's graduation, and that didn't go well. But that's my scar tissue because it was already planned, everything was arranged, and the principal asked me to support him, and man, I fell on the sword on that one. It didn't go well. We mended it, but I bring back, because graduations are very, very personal, and they're very, very, they should be very disciplined because you want to get them through quickly. We don't want to prolong those too long. I don't think the parents want that. They're ready to go to the party afterwards anyway.
I just thought of it. So we have recently, I think for the last 2 years, have had a rep, city council rep, attend every single one of our graduations. Huh? Really?
Sorry.
Oh, really? Now, do they speak or just attend?
No, they
Oh, that's good.
sit, and then you feel compelled, though, sometimes to let them stand up there with you when you're handing out the diplomas. They're not handing out the diplomas, but they're shaking hands at the end. And what I did notice is our board operating procedures are silent on that.
Yeah. And let me add to this. This legislator wanted to speak at the ceremony.
Uh-huh.
And it was a campaign, a tough campaign, and it was like, no, because you have a stadium full of constituents, right? But let's face it, those parents are there for the 15 seconds when the child walks across the stage, what I always say, but it's not a campaign. So there's more to the story, but I learned a lesson there.
And I've always said, yes, I realize that they're elected officials. So are mine,
That's a good point.
right?
Yeah.
And when's the last time any of you asked to sit up at the city council and
Yesterday, no, not
You had an hour
I
long.
felt awkward del Valles last time because State Rep Perez Ordaz went up, but then we left Commissioner Holguin sitting, and then, you know, just undue political crap.
So we might want to think about just putting down
I
some
think-
guidelines that say the 7 elected officials are on the stage.
But that other officials can sit up there and be recognized, but that they are not part of the receiving line.
Yeah,
We
and
also have Ysleta.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but like, Robert, the word you were looking for was visceral.
Yeah.
Is that these things are very visceral, and in my community, we graduated our high school still. And so, I mean, we do fireworks and everything, and so politicians showing up,
Yeah.
elected officials showing up, to be seated, it's kind of the norm, and when one of them actually lives across the street from the high school, it's a big deal. When one of them, and I realize it's also politics too, but she's very passionate about this. And
Yeah.
So, but I think you're right. I think we probably need to develop some type of guidance on that.
I think sitting on the stage, but not being part of the ceremony, because the ceremonies are really tight, and they're to the point, and they're about the kids.
But see, like, he does his speech, it's about
Right.
2.5, 3 minutes, if that much. The trustees do their speech, and with one minor exception, it's pretty quick, But
Can go anywhere.
Yeah, but with one minor exception, it's pretty quick. But the problem is if you start getting other people up there, there's a real danger for them going off on things. And so I think you're right. I think we probably ought to do it. And by the way, in one of my cases, that I've seen, the principal was put in a real bad position by someone who just kind of popped in and just wanted to stand up and say something and made her the bad person, and that's not fair.
Why
Yeah.
don't we make a note that that's something we need to change in our
the
board,
policy.
or add to this,
Yeah.
to this
You
board
know,
operating
For
procedure?
me, if they want to stand up there and, but not to speak.
But
It's
not to speak, and maybe not even to go into the receiving line, just because then you run the risk of leaving others out.
Right,
Yeah, that felt awkward.
Yeah.
yeah, I think those 2 points are good.
The only thing I would say to that, though, is if there's any exception to be made, it would be at Ysleta where the Tiguas come up and they recognize their own, because they've been doing it for.
They absolutely need to
Forever.
be part of the, yeah, how do we fix that?
Because they even do it in my, I get a couple of
Actually,
Tiguas.
they've been doing it all at schools that have TIGWA graduates. Del Valle's got the highest number of TIGWA attendees, but you know what, they don't ever make the speech.
No.
No,
They
they
just come
just-
up just for their.
And they
their
just go at the,
student,
kind
their
of
tribal
what
member.
a trustee does that's not from that feeder pattern when they see one of their students.
But
Go-
maybe we could make that exception as
Yeah.
the tribal members versus elected officials.
Well, the problem is that one of them was the governor, who's an elected official by his tribe, but the other one was I think a council member or something, but I can't remember.
Sometimes they're like, you would know more than I would, but I know there was the governor and then I don't know, you call him a vice governor or what, but sometimes the second person or maybe another person on their council.
And by the way, they shared with me that they had two students graduate, or two tribal members graduate from Parkland. And they weren't even aware of it. And so I told them, I said, contact the district. They'll be glad to work with you on those things.
Well, I mean, the ceremony's for the kids, right? So we
Yeah.
want to highlight them. Valedictorian, salutatorian should be given long speeches, not et cetera, et cetera. All right, good. Former trust, got that. Item 6, I'm on page 8, information or report requested by the board member between board members. That's, I looked at that as good practice. I didn't see anything, I didn't highlight anything on that. Is it an issue that needs, you good with that? Okay.
We communicate
Use a process for that.
whatever they request.
I'm on page 9, citizens request complaint to an individual board member. When a citizen complains to you, you should remind the citizen due process, refer to the citizen to the superintendent's. Board member shall inform the office of the superintendent about that complaint. Some boards stumble on that.
If I get a
Go ahead.
If I get a complaint or an email, I usually just forward it to Dr. Latorre. Can you look at this and see what you can do? And usually he takes charge of it right away. And then later on, I asked him maybe in a day or two, what was the result? Oh, so-and-so called them and everything was resolved. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I rarely want to get into a position where I'm trying to fix something for somebody especially that I don't even know,
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to bring a point, and it happened not too long ago. I had a call from a person in Mr. Ramirez's district. And so I contacted Dr. De La Torre, but then I called him to make him aware.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Yeah,
I
exactly. I've had that happen to me.
See,
and I refer 'em.
if something happens in my situation, they call you, I think I ought to be aware of it, even though you went directly to It doesn't bother
Right.
me that you were taking care of it, but I think, to a matter of courtesy, I should be at least made aware, hey, so-and-so's contacted, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that'd be a good practice.
Right.
I think item B on this is important, and it falls on the superintendent or administrative staff to circle back with that board members that we took care of that constituent. We're going to meet with her in the morning. That way it's off your agenda, right? The worst thing you can hear is nobody called me.
Right.
And now that's different than saying, I'll fix it. I want to make a comment. Somebody said that earlier. If you tell a constituent, don't worry, I'm going to take care of that. Guess what? This is what I found. I had a board member tell me, why do they all keep calling me? Even people from other people's zones are calling me. That's because you're telling people you can fix it. And they'll say, well, you ought to call Miss Lucero. She's a fixer. Oh, really? Ding. It's like, why are you calling me? Call your own board member. Well, he told me to call you. No, anything. But, so be careful of that. It's always good to turn them back to the process. It's all here. That mitigates them thinking that you're the fixer of the district. All right, good.
It's been very good to tell them that, I don't know if you were gonna go there, Charlie, that we don't want to get, this is an important, whatever they're bringing up is important, but if it gets to the point where it's at the board on a grievance, we want to be able to participate, so we don't get involved, and then we contact the proper.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is that DLT's been real good about allowing us access to Dr. Chacon and to basically the cabinet. And by doing those things, you know, the infamous, there's a hole in the parking lot type thing, you know, we don't need 42
It
people
doesn't have to go
involved.
ping, ping, ping.
You know, I can just send a simple email, and then the way they work amongst themselves, I know for a fact that he's gonna hear,
Yeah.
oh, by the way, Trustee Ramirez got a parking lot complaint, you know,
Yeah.
and so, just in passing, so he knows what's going on. And I think that actually, that open communication works real well for us.
So
does-
go ahead.
Does that influence number 3 on here? Because that was something I was thinking as I read that, because we are allowed to speak with cabinet members. He may want us to keep this in here.
I'm sure back in the day, whoever was the superintendent wanted everything to go through them, and then he would decide who gets it. So it's,
Right. Yeah, that's,
it can either be completely removed.
Do we need to just strike that,
well,
possibly?
so
or
I'll
do
tell
we
you,
need
I think
to-
you and I were talking about this. Let's say my operations guy, there's something wrong with the buses aren't clean. I'm just throwing this out there, and somebody complains about it. And if the operations person talks to that community member about that, I'm sorry, a board member, it talks to a board member, that my rule of thumb is I don't mind you talking to them about it, just tell me about it so that I know. But sometimes one of my administrative staff can explain to a board member what the problem is, and then you can tell your constituents. So it's a matter of trust in my deal. And I just always wanted to loop, not that I didn't trust anybody, board members or my team, but I had a rule of thumb is that if a board member contacts you about a concern, you need to let me know internally. That may be what you do as well. But they're really good at handling some of the problems. I mean, they should be.
Right.
That's part of their job.
Well, I agree with all of that, but to me, it says, but should not discuss the complaint with any other district personnel. And to me, that's pretty outright, no, we shouldn't be talking to anybody else. So, to me, pardon? They came from Zolkowski. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, we either need to change it or strike it. But that's just me, maybe, but.
I'll put it down, and then we're recording so that I can introduce anything into like a strikeout version for you guys, so that then we can send it out, and if 2 months down the road or at the next board meeting, we want to adopt some new board operating procedures that are going to be very similar to the ones that we have here, to at very least change the date here so that when someone goes to it, because we say, no, that's in our board operating procedures, and they happen to go and follow up, and they go, really? So it's been about 5 years since you revisited your board operating procedures, so we got to update these anyway, so.
Yeah, even if it's one word, you
Yeah.
can change the date, right?
Yeah.
This is a biggie, really a biggie. I don't know how much we need to go into it. It's a matter of discipline. Employee requests grievance to individual board member. You got to be very careful on this one, because there's a process, Mr. Community Member, Miss Community Member, that you can file, I see heads nodding, so you know you can file a grievance, but I can't hear all the details because I want to be part of hearing that grievance. Y'all know that. Okay, you've been trained on that. Good. Don't let that slip. That goes back to, I can fix your problem. No, there's a process for that, right? Yeah. Okay, good. And by the way, administration's echoing the same thing. There's a grievance process, so let's use it. Vendor requests concerned to individual board member. Vendor requests, let's see. If approached by a vendor regarding any issue related to ongoing solicitation of the board member, you know, rule of thumb there, turn that back to the superintendent. Boy, the worst thing you can hear is, listen, I don't want this to get to the superintendent, but He said, well, it's going to get to the superintendent, you might as well not even tell me. Okay? Because they're trying to play you against her or him. Got it? Vendors are making a living out there, folks. I kind of feel
Yeah,
like.
I've had invites to go to some of their meetings with, like dinner or something, and I usually turn them down because it's not, I don't think it'd be a good thing for me to even be seen there.
Well, your brand is spread among, vendors talk to one another. And they'll say, man, that Ysleta board, they're hard to get to, and that's a good sign, right? It's hard. I can't even have a 30-minute conversation without them saying, well, let's talk to the superintendent.
I've always
Right.
found that best practice anyways. They invite me anywhere, then I just take him with me.
Yep.
Then I have a
Yep.
witness, and he's there to make sure I don't do anything or say anything.
Yeah, and, well, okay.
Especially these last couple of years, because they're all aware of the ESSER money.
Yes,
ESSER money. And I've noticed that recently, they've been in town because they just heard Canutillo is gonna go out for a bond. El Paso's talking about going out for a bond. Socorro, I think, is gonna go out for a bond a year from now. A lot of them work both with school districts and with municipalities, so they're thinking about the UMC situation. So rarely does a day pass when someone isn't asking to see whether or not you're available for lunch.
Let me ask a question, and this is just something he brought up right now, is it okay for me to ask Dr. Latorre for us to go talk to a vendor over lunch?
I think it's,
Yeah, you,
oh, well, yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's well, let me put it to the, and I will say this about vendors. I don't want to give them a bad rap. They're making a living. They're putting their kids through college. They have to make a living, and there are some really, really good people out there. So the short answer to me was absolutely, as long as you both stay disciplined. I think if a vendor sort of gives a wink and a nod and is feeling you out for how much of an influencer you can be on the superintendent or stuff like that, I think turning them, at that lunch, turning them away, or not turning them away, but making them very clear, look, ethics is a big part of our board, and I really don't tell the superintendent what to do. Now, I will say this, I'm impressed with your product or whatever, and when the time comes for an RFQ or thing, I'm gonna certainly see if you respond to that. That's kind of the code for, there's no further way to go with me other than this lunch, and there's no quid pro quo on this lunch.
oh, okay.
but
I
the other
don't
thing
owe
that-
you anything for this lunch.
the other thing to keep in mind too is if there's an RFQ or an RFP for cell phones, then don't go to lunch, don't take any phone calls from anybody who works with a cell phone company if that process is already open for procurement. Or if there's going to be something up in the future.
Oh, yeah, especially during acquisition.
Let me elaborate one more thing on that. I was reminded of some bad experiences with some board members who were undisciplined, let's put it that way. Another good thing is to say, as a follow-up of this lunch, I'm going to ask you to do one thing, Mr. or Miss Vendor. I need for you to contact our superintendent. I need for you to contact, and he will direct you to its operations, transportation, to the curriculum person. See, that's going through the channels. I enjoyed the lunch, the dinner, the wine, or whatever. I enjoyed that. But the follow-up on this, I'm done with you as a vendor, okay? Would you go through my superintendent? And by the way, this is just me ad-libbing here on the mic. If they do not do that, that's not a good sign. Because I always like to, I always try to look for those vendors that were out there talking to most of them, 90% of them went through me and said, do you mind if I talk to a board member? Well, or I talked to a board member and say, that's fine. But the ones that didn't go through the administration, and this is not self-serving, and I had some concerns about that because I think they were trying to backdoor sort of their way in and maybe testing how disciplined a board can be. So you need to be mindful of that. But the short answer is yes, you can.
And those are things that when we come on to the board as new members, I mean, there's no handbook really that outlines how you conduct yourself in these situations, and it's a very touch and go situation because you don't want to put yourself in a vulnerable position because you really don't know how to conduct that kind of business. No.
Well, I was going to say, Robert, and I don't know how deep he wants to go into it. Robert was in the Socorro Independent School District when all of those indictments and arrests happened. And what was leading up to that was a lot of what you're describing right now in terms of conversations that they were having with board members, vendors and board members that were being recorded. And a topic of a lot of those conversations was the superintendent and how much they could push or how much they could pull on him. And the answer was obviously zero, but
No, I think that's true, and/or they're seeing how much influence you have over other board members. You know, in other words, I'll go to the extreme. I think I can get Ms. Lucero and Ms. Woodruff on board. Let me get back with you on this. Then it's like, yeah, they go, yeah, okay, we've got that. That's an undisciplined board. I enjoyed the lunch. I want you to go through the process. What about the other board members? Can you help me with them? No, I can't help you with the other board members. You're going to have, that's two different lunches or whatever. But the fact that you have the culture, they're on their own, they're independent, but don't, I guess, recruit me or leverage me and my influence, because you could be and they'll go for the most influential board member probably, is they watch your meetings and things like that. This is being recorded, and many of my friends, I have a couple of friends, lifelong friends, that started as vendors. Not all of them, not very many at all. But they're really, really good people. They are legitimate, they are ethical, et cetera. So don't get me wrong. That's not what you're saying. The most vendors would say, no, this is just me to get to know you. I just wanted 15 minutes of your time because you are a powerful leader that helps make decisions. I just wanted you to get to know me and tell you I don't expect anything as a result of this. And yes, I have talked to your superintendent, or my next step per your direction will be to call your superintendent. So thank you. That's generally, I would say 8 out of 10 of them are probably going to behave that way. Yes.
Okay. I understand the vendor process and what have you, but there's one thing that I have been very inquisitive about.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get here until I got on the board and began to understand the magnitude of dollars that are here. And then in addition to the bonds and what have you, $845 million is what we've gone through. And my point here is that one particular individual company has been the one that's landlocked El Paso, not only here, but throughout the community in the county and what have you. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, but in the money world, you always have to look at what else is available to you. And so without overstepping anyone, I feel that we're still locked into one particular company. Are we looking at it very objectively? And it's a very touchy thing. Mm-hmm. Because I'm kind of pointing out things, or fingers, but I'm not. It's just that in that environment, in that arena, you just don't accept things as such. Because right now we're in a down cycle, but when things were not down, were we getting the best dollar value for our investment? So how do you bring that about? Because I've had people want to at least participate, but they've not been able to come in here. So my question is, are we getting our best dollars with the people we have been involved with?
Yeah, and they may bring that up to you. You know,
it is very touchy.
Yeah, we feel like there's a monopoly on this building schools here with these two.
Maybe there is, but it's the best thing we can get.
Sure.
But maybe it isn't. Maybe something's better out there.
Well, I mean, that's something you bring up with the superintendent.
But to address that, we as a board don't get down to RFPs and who is getting awarded the contract, or we don't vote on any of that. We don't even try to influence that.
Right there.
We don't try to influence any of that.
No, that's in your ethics.
Do we? I mean, I don't even know what RFPs are out there, requests for proposals, or when contracts are awarded, or anything like that. Yeah, but we don't have any influence as to calling whoever, get called and say, hey, what do you think about this? Because I don't want to be involved in any of that.
I wouldn't want to be involved either.
No, but the thing is, none of us are involved in that, as I hope that we have called anybody within his staff and say, hey, I want this contract looked at, or this vendor looked at closely or whatever. I have no preference on that. I have no interest in doing that.
Well, when you do that kind of approach, you're kind of leaning towards one way or another, but that's not my point, is that I guess the overall analysis is what are we doing it correctly and out of a sphere of involvement?
One of the things that I would say is, and we're going through it right now, if there are other providers, other companies who don't believe that they're getting treated fairly, it is up to them to file, it's not called a grievance, to file the complaint that would result in an investigation, because we'd be required to investigate. We'd have to provide all the paperwork. I mean, we're currently being sued by Sun City. What did they do?
Oh, yeah,
Analytics, and they had reached out to you before, right? They took the right step. They said, you know what, we're not going to accept this. We're going to sue them. Once we're being sued, now we have to provide all of the discovery. And if at the end of that process, we find out that they weren't being treated fairly, and they rule against the district, we're going to have some monetary damages that we're going to pay. And then you as a board is going to say, what the heck happened? How'd this happen? Why are we paying them $500,000 as a result of, and where's the source?
And also
So-
to your question, I think it's been a long, long time, but we had a workshop with Ms. Gerlach where she went over the RFP, RFQ process and how they go through it all and how the committee goes through it in order to come up with their decisions. And that might be something maybe we could do again.
If you, I don't know if this is pertinent, but it seems to be, if you look on page 11 of 17I, this goes back to what you were saying, Mr. Rosales, in a way, individual board members shall not meet or discuss, and here's the key, district business with vendors. Now, if a vendor says, I have the problem with the way y'all are handling business, you're only giving it to one or two vendors, and can't get our foot in the door, that's really talking about administrative business, right? And did you see that?
On which one?
It's on page 11,
I'm
on the very bottom, I.
on I?
Individual board members shall not meet with or discuss district business with vendors. See, that I could be a vendor complaining, I want to do business in your district, but it's hard to get into your district. And the way y'all select, yada, 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 people I don't like, well, you need to bring that up with him, because they're the ones that are looking at the RFQs, they're the ones that are processing them, and then we ask questions does that make sense? I don't discuss school business and how it's operating, you're gonna have to go to the superintendent. And we were just talking about a vendor that we both know that he said it's hard to get into your, I'm not getting enough business from your district. That's a conversation we have with the superintendent, not with the board member. Does that make sense?
No, it makes
Yeah.
sense. I'm not there, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, but I think, but you're bringing up something that's very important, because,
It's very-
if I'm a vendor, I just want to see if you want to talk about it. And if you say, I don't want to talk about that, well, okay, well, then let's have dessert and we're out of here. You just
Yeah,
can't go
and
down
you
that
can-
path.
You can kind of jump into, for example, the health insurance.
Yeah, well,
It's a very volatile
Right.
arena right now. And are we getting the best bang for our dollar for our employees? You know, and it puts pressure on them, because I'm not going to get involved with a process of selecting or looking at or reviewing. That's not my job. But I guess I bring it up as far as the question, are we being fair with our at their level, not at mine?
right, and that discussion is with the superintendent.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's very time consuming. The money part and the health insurance, and it's not just an overnight thing. But I was amazed with the number of, I learned a lot just as I talked to these guys with the bonds. They're offering bonds. Man, had I been smart in my life, I wouldn't be with State Farm. I'd be you're talking
Yeah,
about
that's
a lot
big.
of.
A
you're
bond
talking about
underwriter?
A lot of money.
It's huge, yeah, big.
1 or 2% of.
It's
You can make
not
quite a bit.
cutthroat, but it's a very competitive,
It's competitive.
and it's high yield, yep.
Can we take a 5-minute?
Sure, 5 minutes?
And then
There's sandwiches, we have a working lunch, how's that?
We're gonna work, grab your lunch. We're not gonna stop for lunch.
Oh, man. There's three of them, they're called.
So we're authorization of the board, that's important. E, Mr. Superintendent or any other board members, any other concerns on communications?
No, I think that's something that we do exceptionally well.
Good.
We're very transparent, very open, with the exception of those topics that can only be discussed in closed session.
Evaluation of the superintendent.
We need to update B. Yeah.
Oh,
I'll take care of that.
oh, Vision 2020.
Evaluation.
Right, it probably says June or something.
We could not have envisioned 2020.
For real?
And then we're trying to get over it.
It's like Vision 2020 : WTF? Question mark.
That's being recorded.
What? Great.
What?
Funny.
What's that feeling?
What's that feeling?
All new trustees shall participate and approve the superintendent evaluation training. That seems to be okay. Evaluation of the board. The board will evaluate itself annually to measure effectiveness. I think you wanted to mention about that instrument.
That's something I think that also came up as a result of the dynamics back in the day, where every year you do a self-evaluation, or you could do it at any time, I guess, during the year, and it really would turn into a,
And this was the instrument that still, I don't know if y'all recognize that or not. That's a lot.
Yeah, that was misery. And even after we completed that finally, she basically never shared the results with the rest of the board of how it turned out. They kind of buried it, and
Was that used to finger point,
yes,
to isolate?
always, yes. And so that's when it was instituted, the board self-evaluation in closed session. Then that was basically used to, well, Mrs. Woodruff, what terrible things are you up to now? Although they would usually expound on it, and then a lot of times you'd just be sitting there going, oh, it's my turn, okay. Don't even remember what you're talking about.
How's that an evaluation?
It's not.
It's kind of a
It's
gotcha.
not. It is. It was used as a gotcha. And I think as a result of that, we have kind of failed in this
Yeah.
area, because I know for myself, it brings back such memories of, oh my, yeah.
just delete it.
I don't think, they say every time we go somewhere that boards should be evaluating ourselves. And actually, during my years as president, I wanted us to try to find some sort of evaluation tool that wasn't that.
Yeah.
I think
So-
it is good for people to have, to look at their operation and see, and even to point out the good things that you've accomplished during those board self-evaluations, but saying, you know what, we struggled a little bit here, maybe we need to, but not, okay, that, Connie Woodruff, why did you blah, 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 blah? I think it needs to be a more collective thing.
You're
where
talking
the-
about a board as a whole, not as an individual member.
Exactly. Because I don't think that's really even the meaning of this evaluation. And it says board, Connie Woodruff's not the whole board.
Yeah.
And so I think it's looking at the board as a whole. And I do think we need to do something.
Should.
I've always said that's the one area I think that we should do something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm always kind of like, okay, here comes the board evaluation again because of past experience.
No, I think, so, and this is something you all might want to consider. It is BG local, so it's referencing a local a policy you have. And I'm wondering if this is the exhibit. It may be. I don't know that it is.
That's it.
Okay, so that may be, you might want to keep, I'm just suggesting, you might want to keep, I like that, a checking in, how are we doing? And I think you and I were talking about this, maybe even if it's a sort of an individual just survey of 5 to 8 questions. For example, how comfortable do you feel in expressing yourself on this board on a scale of 1 to 5? And you just answer 5 questions. But I'm not trying to say that this isn't important. If you could, I would recommend, a working dinner or maybe even lunch where that's your time to evaluate how we're doing. But it does not have to be this arduous, right? So that could be a change, okay? Selection of board officers. Yep, go ahead.
On the Lone Star governance people, they're still recommending a board self-evaluation.
Yes,
Are they still recommending the use of that big, long document?
Yep,
Yes.
That's from what I understand. I'm not too schooled up on Lone Star governance, but I haven't heard anything otherwise. Yeah. Yeah. Selection of board officers, I'm on page 12, item 9, 14. President shall have been a member of the board, the vice president shall have been a member. Those are the criteria at the bottom. Any issues on election of officers? Does that happen, let's see, annually? First we do the election of odd number of years. So odd number of years, okay. Yeah, and by the way, I'm not, this is, Mr. Ochoa didn't pay me to do this, but I counsel a lot of boards now, just kind of do a deep thought into who should be your board president based on what we talked about earlier. I think that we should all aspire, possibly, if that's in your desire, to be the president, but it's just not going to be handed around. That's just my recommendation. My wife just retired after 10 years as superintendent as Elgin, and she had the same board president for 10 years. And I talked to the board about that because they know I'm doing training and stuff. I said, well, I mean, it's kind of like we were saying earlier, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have a good board, and he does a good job, so we're okay with that. That's not to say it shouldn't be changed, but y'all just put some thought into that because it can really affect the board. Outgoing trustees, we are at a special board meeting, that's no problem. I'm on 15 now, page 13. Role and authority of board members and or board officers. Obviously, the president, I won't read all this, but the the superintendent, the board president has more responsibilities throughout this document. I'm sorry, go ahead.
On number 4, it says any officer shall be limited to 2 two-year terms in the same office. So we have your term limits.
That's true. That's a good point. You may want to revisit that. You would have to change that if you wanted to keep your vice president, everybody in the same chair. So that may be something you want to look at. Now, that's something for you all to decide. I don't want to oversell that you should, but I'm just pointing out. You would. In the real world, you would never, if you have 4 assistant principals and 1 principal, you would never rotate the principal's job based on those assistant principals. Maybe that's a bad analogy. But if there's leadership there and you have, if you want to change that, go ahead. I've just.
In this scenario, there was no 2-year limits, but there'd still be an election held, period, right?
It does say, on this one it says
The elections will be held every 2 years.
yeah, but it says they will be
Yeah, but on 4, B4.
held to two-year terms.
It used to be one,
In the same office.
it used to be every year.
President again.
Right.
Change office by this, by what
Right.
it says.
You could not be what my wife's scenario, but Byron was his name. He couldn't be 9 years.
I mean, it's up to the board. I'm not,
It's up to the board, right.
it's not a.
And that will come up, I'm sorry, Mr. President, but that will come up during, when it's time to reelect officers. Y'all will need to address this at that time.
And it doesn't mean you'll get reelected.
No,
But it used to be every year, but that was when we had 3-year terms.
Well,
And
no,
then we
but
moved
from
it
what,
to 2-year terms because of,
what I understand from this, let's be clear on this, that even if he or she wants to be the president, they can't continue. They term out. Now, you could just add to that unless otherwise designated by board or something.
well, the only time I've seen it otherwise is when we had a horrible board that they wanted to
Right.
continue it. But with good boards, I've never seen anybody have an issue with term limits.
This was put in there because of the bad governance?
There was,
I don't know that you could say
Say that because they're never going to admit their bad governance. And So, I mean, if you're going to put that in there, it's going to be like, well, that's not us. I think his point, the reason that it was put in was because,
I think we did it during mine because we did it when I became president because the board was, we still had some of
At
those
3-4.
dissenters in there. And they're like, yeah, we're going to limit you. Okay, great.
yeah,
Because going
exactly,
forward,
exactly,
we'll limit everybody so we don't get you guys again.
right.
Well, it's to your advantage if it's weak leadership, because you rotate them out.
Right.
Right.
But it's to your disadvantage if they're strong.
Right.
So I would say y'all can work on the verbiage on that. It may be, unless
Maybe-
the board, whatever.
Unless,
disagrees with it.
unless,
But it is, unless the board says otherwise, without saying it, because we're the ones that modify the procedures.
Yeah, we'd have to modify that procedure. If that's something we want to leave open in the future. we'd
Right.
have to modify it. Probably prior to.
well, strictly
Yeah, because we
speaking,
have elections coming up next year.
right.
And so the-
But strictly speaking, these are supposed to be updated every year.
Right.
So strictly speaking, you can change that in regards to your situation, I guess. So it could be changed for this year, and then the next board could change it back. If they were following, strictly speaking, if you did
Yeah,
this.
and Mr. Ochoa and I talked,
Yeah.
I recommend to board presidents to, as part of my session that I do, that they do a self-evaluation among all the other board members. In other words, he can
Yeah.
have a 30-minute, hour meeting, lunch with each one of you individually. He's getting, or she's getting feedback, hey, how could I improve as y'all's president, as our president? How could I make you a better board member, things like that. That's just good. It's like the superintendent going around to the principals, the principals go around to teachers. How can I get better as your leader? And be honest with me about that. Well, you don't run our meetings well enough. You don't do this, you don't do that. And that's good feedback, because you want to be a good, that's just good leadership. Go ahead.
I think it would be a good thing to institute anyway, besides, just me being the board president, I think for the vice president as well as, or any other one, to go talk to around and have a 30-minute meeting with each individual.
Yeah.
And say, you know what, let's work this out, or not work it, is that what are we doing well, what are we not doing well? Or what am I not doing well? And I think that would even make this, like we were saying, make this board even a stronger entity by doing that. Just, communication is always the key to resolving or making things better for everybody.
If you want to remove the limit, really what you're basically saying is that you're going to have officer elections every odd-numbered year.
Every odd number year.
And then
There you go.
it
Yeah.
takes care of itself, because if the board thinks you're doing a great job, you'll get reelected. If they want to go in a different direction, they'll go in a different direction. But it doesn't limit you, so that even if you thought somebody was doing a great job, you'd be compelled to move on and rearrange or reorganize the board.
And that's true unless you have a bad board. I mean, because in our situation, it was 4, they were going to win every argument with us. They were going to
But
win
that
every.
would be true even if
Yeah.
you had a limit, because all they do is they
Right.
rotate it to another one of
Right.
the bad ones.
Absolutely true. And that's what they did, basically.
Yeah. They-
Yeah, that's the extreme example.
Well, we'll let that marinate, and
Yeah.
I just made note to question
To
mark.
go back on.
Can I say one more thing about that? If I'm a board member and I'm interested in becoming the president, I just want to be, that there's a process for part of the board president's role is to groom future leaders as well. All right? Okay. Remember the guy I said, I'm not ready to be president, I'm going to go tell him? He told me I need a little more time based on what you shared in your presentation. I need some touching up before I sit in that role, because I don't want to mess up our board. So that was good of him to say that.
I have a huge amount of respect for a guy like that.
Exactly,
That says
yeah.
a whole lot about the type of man he is.
Yeah, and it shocked me that he said that. I was like, and you know what, when I shared that with, it wasn't his superintendent, I shared that with the superintendent, I said, you have no idea, you did that superintendent a favor by him delaying that a little bit, because the wheels can come off, right? All right. 13 of 17, role and authority of board members and board officers. I didn't have any notes on this. I think we've got the vice president shall, parliamentarian shall. Mr. Haggerty, you're the parliamentarian, is that right? I think you're the police officer for the Robert's Rules of Order at the board meeting, assist the president in conducting orderly, so he's your hitman.
And he's good at it, too.
Wow.
He's,
So excuse the pun, but you put out all the fires at the board meeting.
he's a fireman.
I had to throw that in there.
We had a meeting during the difficult times, and I came up with, I called a question. Nobody knew what the hell
Oh, yeah. You called a what? Yeah, you know, okay. No, I'm saying that's, yeah.
troublemakers, they know what the heck.
15 of 17, role of the board member, board and executive session. Does your, without going through over this, does your attorney come to your board meetings?
Yes.
Okay. Does he or she sit in your executive session? All right.
We did,
Oh, really?
we did.
Per
What?
the
When?
council?
When we didn't have,
When?
nobody went back, did they? We- No, but I meant, we
Before
didn't have an
us?
attorney. It was before you guys.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. For your watch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but we literally did, and when Mr. Haggerty figured it out and left the board meeting, I was brand new, I got up and I left too, because I was like, oh, he's right about that.
So,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that I was blessed with in San Antonio was to have an attorney who sat in closed session, and I mean, she was a pit bull about, stop that conversation now. She helped me. I couldn't do that, but it keep the board out of trouble.
We have Mr. Safi that really does that.
Oh, I know Mr. Salty. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
good.
he keeps us in line when
Good.
we're talking about a topic and then we get off topic and he says, very politely, he says, you need to get back on topic.
Very good. And I think he or she, it's an attorney that can help you with this. But you all know about closed session. You've had enough training in that, I hope? Yes. Okay, very good. Oh, by the way, there's something here, if there's ever an issue, you can always recess, go to closed session, go talk about, if there's conduct that needs to be talked about, or whatever, you got that? All right.
You know, we never had that opportunity.
Good.
There wasn't an opportunity. We had necessity
Thank
Necessity.
the
to go
Lord.
into, yeah, thank God, because everything has been in order, yeah. We have called a recess, but that was for other reasons, but not to go into closed session.
Well, when you go back to
Health-
closed
health
session 3 or 4
breaks.
times a meeting, it's a
Huh?
bad sign.
Health breaks usually.
Yeah,
Media, I'm on 16 of 17. I think the media inquiries to the board president, you know, is the official spokesperson. Sometimes that can be an issue with some members. They want to go drive a wedge into the board via the media, and we can't fix the unreachables. We discipline, that's part of what we believe in, and it's a real good discipline to have. The media, I don't want to get back on vendors, but the media looks for that crack in the armor, too. They want to find that board member, oh, y'all not getting along, huh? That's a headline.
good
Especially
thing
when
about
we've
the
had a
media.
problem.
the
Like,
media hasn't really been calling us. on
Not
us at all.
anymore. Only when things were hot, they wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah,
good,
I
good.
think it's a
Refer to the
really
president.
good practice because you can get yourself into some really sticky situations if you don't, so.
Oh, okay, so we talked about anonymous letters you don't address. By the way, there's a little typo there. If you want to, while you're correcting this, see that B? My B is not in.
Oh, I see. Formatting.
Oh, and also the formatting, thank you. The board trustees encourages input. A signed letter will be forwarded to the superintendent for a response with a copy sent to all the board members.
What is that?
What is that?
That-
I guess that's from public. The board encourages input. A signed letter will be forwarded to the
Oh, this is
superintendent.
about a complaint that somebody forwards to the trustee, then we
Oh,
we forward
you
it to the.
respond in writing.
We will forward it to the superintendent for a response.
Okay, well, okay,
Usually it's emails that I get, and then I just forward it to him.
okay.
Yeah. I don't
I
respond.
don't know,
anymore.
y'all, that's a little dated. It probably goes back to when there was only.
Maybe we
written
should
stuff.
change it to emails or any correspondence. Any
There you go, any
correspondence.
correspondence.
Just say any correspondence, that covers it all.
Signed. That is signed.
And number 19, we're getting close to the
They
end.
are by bill.
Number 19 is what we're doing today. Do
What's
you do that annually, or, yeah, okay. All right.
Change the language to every 8 years.
2020 had to go.
Well, there's an advantage of being a well-oiled machine. You don't have to work on it all the time.
You know that that's actually true because so many, we reviewed them so much more when we were having trouble than when we started functioning well. So,
Why is B redundant with A? Let's see.
board will-
Oh, standard board operating procedures will be reviewed, and then B says we'll adopt the board procedures and board code of conduct.
We don't have
Where
a
is
code
that?
of conduct.
That's the sign in
The
there.
ethics?
Oh, that's the one out there?
That's the sign that's in there, yeah.
No?
No, it's not, it's the
There's a
sign.
document that's up
Oh,
in
the
there.
document that's framed around the
Yes,
building?
yes,
The
yes.
one you read every day.
You know,
like you to
there's
archive
only,
that one.
there's only one reason I like
Gold
for,
Out EP. Oh, that's that group that wanted to gold out on Friday.
you know, I don't mind keeping that document in the boardroom just
Yeah.
for one reason, to remind us where we don't want to go. I really
Okay.
don't. Just for that reason, we don't want to go there.
Should put a little sign on there where we don't want to be.
There you go. Yeah, and that's the only reason why.
Black frame right there in the corner.
Are you guys
Oh, is that
there
where it is?
too?
Okay.
I believe that's it.
No.
Well, I
I
mean,
think it's about public comment.
Any other place in the building, I say get rid of it.
Well, I mean, we could leave it there, but we should strike it out from here.
Right, but I don't mind leaving the one in the boardroom just for a reminder.
No,
Yeah.
we should leave it about, but it's not binding or anything.
Those are kind of embarrassing. I don't see why.
Well,
so B's kind of strange. The board will adopt. Anyway, we don't need to get into the weeds on that. It's kind of, that may be dated. So you may want to look at that, because it says you will adopt the board procedures and the board code of conduct. I don't know why you would adopt that every
Regular
year, other than
monthly
just bless
meeting.
it. Okay.
wow.
These board procedures are intended to guide and assist the Board of Trustees in the conduct of its business. They are not intended to confer legal rights. And I'm not sure B and C are a good fit for operating
We're gonna,
procedures, but,
obviously, we'll adopt these, right?
yeah,
It's the code of conduct that
yeah,
you're,
yeah. Oh, there it is.
But we do have member conduct.
It even
Wow,
has,
boy, that's fancy.
has a seal.
Wow. Signed by, yeah. So is it dated? Yeah, 2013, folks.
You signed it. You signed it.
Yeah, Ms. Woodruff,
She signed it.
Ms. Woodruff, would you come up here? We have a gift to present.
It's,
In a board meeting.
Patricia McLean, Pearson, Dwayne Ennis, Debbie Lewis, Marty Reyes, Shane Haggerty's on here,
Oh,
and Connie Woodruff. What the-
Y'all better behave.
that 2013 was my first year on the board, and so, yeah, they pounded us pretty heavy.
so let's not make light. Let me bring this back to earth. It was probably very much needed at the time and a very good tool.
No, no. That's actually, yeah, that's the thing. We were, to
Yeah.
the best of our ability, because like I said, I was brand new. Mr. Haggerty actually helped me a lot with a lot of these things.
Sure.
And we were, but the people that were enforcing them were the ones who were really not.
We're weaponizing them.
They were. It was used as a
Oh,
weapon.
There's a velvet hammer. They call it,
Yes.
right?
Funny one's in here.
Told you.
What is the don't interfere in someone else's election or
I
something
will
like
not
that?
participate in the
one.
election for or against
But there's
another
like
board member.
4 trustees.
Oh, and they broke
Going
that one
against-
big time.
The incumbent
They,
in Bel Air.
they put the candidate that came against me in the 2015.
Well, so can I recommend that maybe, we're not going to do it today, but you may want to look, because somebody could hold you to those things, right? I mean, you may want to look back at that. You may want to just archive it. Your board ethics seem to be really good. Well, I mean, it's signed by folks and it's got a seal on it, so I don't know. You've got board operating procedures, you've got policy, and you've got your ethics policy, so I think that's pretty solid.
Should I fail to follow these guidelines, I ask my fellow board members to call it to my attention. When that happens, I pledge to accept the feedback without anger or finger pointing and to renew my efforts to follow this code.
So can we, do we need to rescind it? Is that what what do we need to do to get rid of that? We use this. This is what our.
Just take it out of the policy.
Like,
Yeah, because
Just delete it from the policy, the whole line.
actually, that's even titled because this says Board of Code of Conduct, and that's Code of Ethics. I don't mean to be
this is
nitpicky.
our ethics here.
Oh, it says Code of Conduct up there, /Code of Ethics.
Yeah, get out the code
Standards
of
of
conduct.
conduct.
Goodbye.
I think your ethics replaced that probably.
Who was it?
All right.
20,
All right.
Anything else?
we did?
No,
Oh, no.
we are done.
We have, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a workshop and no action will be taken. Dr. De La Torre, do you have any other presentations?
No, sir.
All right, there's one more item on here that I think we'll just do real quickly. We have now a conversation surrounding internal audit committee. And to expedite this process, I wish to ask you, Soltero, Connie, and who else was it? Don't shake your head.
An audit committee?
Audit committee. Okay, well, I'll let my vice president take over that process.
Congratulations.
Speak. You accept, thank you.
Yeah, it's a double.
That delegates is one thing. This is for internal audit, this is internal to us. Unless somebody else wants to volunteer. It's nothing just to have like an oversight committee that has, Susan has the document for that, just to help our internal auditor in the process that she's doing, which is doing great, and other areas that could be addressed before bringing them up to the board.
I don't know, because I think you're really good at that. You have really great.
Yeah, but
I mean, yeah, you're the numbers. I kind of think that you're the right man to be on this committee.
I can advise, but I don't want to be part of the committee per se. I think that, in fact, I think she relies too much on me for that reason, and I think she needs to, so is that okay?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah? All right, well, thank you for your volunteer.
Hey, I'm
I
gonna
think
need some
they-
coaching on this. I mean, can I come to you on it?
Yeah, yeah.
No.
Well,
Because I'm gonna lean on,
I've been dealing with her
If you
for
don't
the
mind.
last 4 years.
Yeah.
Cruz, before you move on, all of the material that Susan, I know she sent me some of it.
Yeah.
Because I asked her for it. Will you make sure that all the board, all the trustees? have
Yeah,
access-
yeah,
get
I think
access
it's
to it?
excellent that all the Board of Trustees get that, so they can understand what this, it's nothing that's going to preclude any decisions or anything. It's just to, it's kind of like having Dr. De La Torre with his staff, and then now the audit committee can address stuff with her before bringing it to the board, and you know, keep things aligned.
Yeah, and this is not punitive. This is.
No,
this is
no, no,
just,
no, no.
Enhancing our process.
Right, and to help us understand a little bit better of how the internal auditor is conducting her business and what does it mean to us. It's nothing extra.
I don't know, do they keep the videos from last year's TASB available?
Some of them.
Some of them?
It was on her,
Yeah,
yeah.
the sessions?
Not all of them are recorded, but some of them are.
That we had a huge crowd, we had a huge number of superintendents in that session. You know, if we could find out whether it exists or not, then
What's-
perhaps we could, it was an internal audit session at last year's TASB in Dallas.
Yeah, but Susan was one of the moderators,
Yeah, Susan
presenter,
Austin was the
as well as
presenter.
some individual from, I don't, Austin or Dallas
He
or
was
something.
with a CPA firm or something like
Yeah.
that, yeah. But it was a really good session, guys.
But they had
and
a
the chance
nice
to hear.
document,
Yeah.
that, the processes and all
And
that.
by the way, if Susan sends out everything again, she sent out the slides from that presentation as well, too. So, I'm sorry, their PowerPoint. Gotta watch that old guy stuff.
All right. Any,
I'll look into it.
anything else?
Congratulations, Charlie.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I tried.
Thank you.
No, may I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you all very much.
Sana.
I keep thinking-